In the beginning, before the light of grace was scattered, and the lands between were torn by countless ambitions, there stood a golden order that seemed eternal. The Erdtree shimmered over all things, its glow filtering through the misted skies like sunlight caught in sacred glass. The people who lived beneath it did not yet know the word tarnished. They were the blessed, born beneath divine light, their destinies ordained by the will of the Greater. It was a time when faith itself took visible form, when the air was heavy with gold dust that settled on the skin like forgiveness. But as all stories in the lands between eventually reveal, eternity is never as permanent as it appears. The moment something is declared unchanging, the cosmos begins to test it. And so the Erdtree's light, once pure and constant, became fractured, its reflection mirrored in countless souls who each sought to define what that divine order meant. At the heart of this golden age stood Queen Marika the Eternal, a god in flesh who both upheld and questioned the order she embodied. Her union with Radagon, her shadow self, bound two contradictions into one divine paradox: creation and destruction, male and female, law and defiance. Under her rule, the Erdtree's radiance extended across the world, seeding every land with the power of grace. Yet beneath that brilliance, fractures were already forming. Marika's doubts became the fault lines of an empire that had forgotten how to question itself. The greater will, a power from beyond the stars, demanded obedience to its unseen law, and Marika, its chosen vessel, began to understand the cruelty hidden within its mercy. The first whispers of rebellion came not from soldiers but from silence, the silence of those who began to see that their suffering was written into the order itself. The Erdtree promised life everlasting, but at a cost. To die was to be denied rest, to be bound in cycles of undeath and servitude. The living were blessed, but the dead were trapped, unable to escape the golden light that claimed to sanctify them. Grace, once seen as salvation, became a gilded cage, and Marika, who had once stood as its high priestess, began to see her own reflection in the countless souls who prayed for release. When she shattered the Elden Ring, it was not merely an act of defiance, it was a plea, a cry that echoed across the lands between, reverberating through gods and men alike. The ring was not a weapon, but a law, a system of control that bound every form of life to the greater will's design. In breaking it, Marika sought to fracture the universe itself, to give humanity a choice, even if that choice came at the price of divine chaos. The Golden Order fell like glass, each shard catching the light of possibility. But where some saw freedom, others saw blasphemy. Her children, Malenia, Miquella, Morgott, Morga, and Radon, each carried fragments of her will, refracted and distorted by their own desires. The shattering war that followed was not fought for land or power, but for meaning. Each demigod believed themselves the rightful heir to what was lost. Morgott clung to the illusion of faith, guarding the Erdtree even as it refused him entry. Morgott turned to blood and corruption, embracing a darker god who whispered of a twisted communion. Radon, mighty and tragic, became the last true general of the Golden Order, holding back the stars themselves in a doomed attempt to preserve a dying age. And Malenia, undefeated in battle, fought not for conquest but for her brother, the gentle Miquella, whose dream promised a new world untouched by rot or flame. Through this chaos, the lands between decayed into beauty and despair intertwined. Grace flickered and withdrew, its once radiant light reduced to faint embers scattered across the earth. These motes of divine guidance fell upon the tarnished, those once exiled by grace, now summoned back to seek it once more. Their journey would begin in silence, waking among graves and ghosts, with only the whisper of light urging them forward. It was as if the world itself had forgotten how to speak, and in that quiet grace began to listen again. To understand what grace truly means, one must first understand its opposite. In Elden Ring's world, grace is not simply divine favor, it is alignment, an unseen tether between mortal will and cosmic order. To lose it is to fall out of harmony with the world, to exist in shadow. But to regain it is not always a blessing, for when grace returns to those it once abandoned, it does so with a demand: restore the order or remake it. The tarnished who rise to this call are not saviors, they are instruments of history repeating itself. Each step they take toward the Erdtree is both pilgrimage and judgment, and yet there is beauty in that struggle. For the first time since the Erdtree's light bathed the world, mortals are free to define their own purpose. The very act of seeking grace becomes an act of rebellion against it, a paradox worthy of the gods themselves. As the Tarnished journeys through Limgrave's windswept ruins, past the watchful eyes of stone giants and the endless mourning of spectral knights, the world seems suspended between decay and rebirth. Every withered flower and shattered monument whispers the same truth. Something holy died here, but its death gave birth to the possibility of something greater. Marika's shattering of the Elden Ring was not an ending, but the creation of countless new beginnings. Each fragment of that divine lore became a seed, and each seed took root in a different soul. The Erdtree still stands, but its light is no longer singular. It has become a prism, reflecting 1,000 different interpretations of what it means to rule, to serve, to live, and to die. The Tarnished, who walks beneath it, carries within themselves the potential to restore the old order, to birth a new one, or to burn the world clean of both. Even in the quiet stillness of Grace's glow, there lingers a question that hums like a distant chord. Was the Golden Order ever truly just, or was it merely beautiful enough to disguise its cruelty? The lands between do not answer. They wait. They breathe in ruin and gold, in memory and ash. Somewhere beyond sight, the greater will watches, patient as time itself, to see whether its lost children will return to its embrace, or choose instead to light a new flame in defiance of the heavens. And so, as the Tarnished rises from the grave and begins their long journey through the fractured world, the first echo of grace returns, not as command but as invitation. The world is broken, but it is open. The divine order has fallen, but in its fall, it has left room for something the gods never intended: choice. The road to the Erdtree stretches endlessly ahead, bathed in the soft gold of a dying sun. It is the first step toward every possible ending. In that stillness, the wind moves through the grass, carrying whispers of those who fell before. The age of grace has ended, but its fragments shimmer like distant stars, waiting for one who will decide which light will rise again. Perhaps that is the truest beginning, not of gods but of those who dared to question them. And in the quiet after the shattering, the question remains, suspended in the golden air. When the light of grace is broken, what kind of world might take its place? When the call of grace fell upon the Tarnished, it did not sound as a trumpet or thunderclap. It was a whisper, soft, nearly mournful, traced across the edges of dying dreams. They had been scattered to distant lands, forgotten by the world and by themselves. Kings reduced to beggars, warriors to wanderers, scholars to hermits staring at empty skies. Yet something stirred in them, an ember rekindled in the ruins of faith. Across oceans and deserts, they began to move as if guided by memory alone, following faint traces of golden light that shimmered just beyond the eye's certainty. The world that awaited them was not the radiant kingdom of their exile, but a corpse of its former glory, its wounds still open and bleeding. To be tarnished was to be chosen, but also to be condemned. The grace that called them home was not a promise of reward, it was a test. In the absence of a unified order, every returning soul became both pilgrim and claimant. No god remained to offer clear purpose. The Erdtree loomed vast and indifferent above them, its roots stretching through the bones of forgotten empires. The golden dust that once settled upon the faithful now fell like ash. Each tarnished who took up the call did so for reasons that mirrored their own broken reflections: duty, pride, vengeance, love. But beneath all of it, deeper than any mortal motive, lay the same ancient yearning to belong again in a world that had outgrown them. The lands between did not welcome their return. The loyal remnants of the Golden Order saw them as blasphemers, the faithless who had abandoned the light when it faltered. Bandits and beasts alike sensed the sickness of divine absence and preyed upon the weak. In this way, the journey of the Tarnished began not in triumph but in humility. They were pilgrims among ruins, relics from an age that no longer knew their names. Yet grace continued to move through them, subtle, persistent, patient. It was not the blinding radiance of gods, but something gentler, like candlelight in a cavern. In Limgrave, where the grass still remembers the golden winds, the Tarnished first encounters the shape of their burden. The wandering knight who guards Stormvale's gates speaks of duty and honor, as if reciting from a dream. The demigod Godric, grafted with stolen limbs, clings to a hollow parody of power, desperate to be whole. These are the first lessons of grace. The understanding that divinity itself is a kind of longing, and that even the mighty tremble when the world stops believing in them. The Tarnished, walking among their fragments, begins to see that to seek the Elden Ring is to walk through the hearts of broken gods and mirror their madness. To follow grace is to follow the memory of order, the golden light that arcs through the air, visible only to the chosen, is not a command but an echo of intent. It leads not to safety but to confrontation, to test whether one's soul can bear the weight of creation's broken law. And each victory won against beast or demigod is not merely a triumph of strength, but a conversation between mortal will and divine expectation. The Tarnished learns to listen to silence, to the pulse of the Erdtree's roots beneath their feet, to the quiet music of ruin. Every shard of rune gathered, every piece of grace touched, restores a fraction of the world's memory. Yet there is a danger in grace's return. The more the Tarnished absorbs it, the more their own identity begins to dissolve. The runes whisper of old loyalties, forgotten hierarchies, the sweet illusion of purpose. To become strong enough to challenge the gods is also to risk becoming one of them, to inherit not their power but their loneliness. For in Elden Ring's world, divinity is not joy, but solitude eternal. Each god is a fragment cut from the whole, destined to repeat the same longing that birthed the world's first light. It is here, in the quiet fields of Limgrave, that the Tarnished meets the maiden who bears no eyes, Melina. She offers what the gods have long forgotten, companionship without condition. Her purpose is to guide, but also to watch, for she too seeks an answer, hidden in the heart of the Erdtree. Her words are soft, her presence spectral, a reminder that even the smallest flame of trust can illuminate the vastest darkness. In her service, the Tarnished finds not merely direction, but reflection, for she embodies what the Erdtree once was, a conduit between will and world, purpose and peace. And yet, Melina's grace is not without its cost. She asks for a promise that when the time comes, the Tarnished will take her to the foot of the Erdtree, where she will set it ablaze. It is an act of devotion and sacrifice, a fire born not of destruction but of release. In her voice, the listener can hear the echo of Marika's defiance, the ancient sorrow of gods who longed for freedom from their own perfection. To follow Melina is to choose the path of transfiguration, where endings and beginnings share the same breath. As the Tarnished grows in power, they begin to sense the invisible threads connecting all things. The world is not a ruin scattered by accident, it is a tapestry deliberately torn, each fragment revealing a secret purpose. The demigods who rule their broken kingdoms are not simply tyrants or monsters, they are echoes of the same divine tragedy that birthed the Erdtree itself. Godric's obsession with grafting limbs mirrors the greater will's obsession with unity, a grotesque attempt to make many into one. Rennala's moonlit academy preserves a dream of rebirth, yet her sorrow reveals the futility of trying to recreate what was never whole. Even the dragons, ancient and proud, cling to the memory of an age when flame and lightning were truth, before gold smothered them beneath its law. Through each of these encounters, the Tarnished learns what the Elden Ring truly represents. Not an artifact of power, but a pattern of existence. It is the sum of every promise ever broken and every law ever written to hold those promises together. To restore it is to accept its paradox, to bring order to a world that was born from chaos, and chaos to an order that has forgotten how to change. The Tarnished, whether they know it or not, carries this burden within. Every decision made along their path will ripple through the unseen fabric of reality, determining not just who will rule, but what rule itself will mean. In this way, the journey becomes less about conquest and more about inheritance. The Tarnished is not merely reclaiming a throne, but redefining what it means to be bound by grace. The Erdtree looms ahead, its glow both beacon and warning. Each step forward carries the weight of unseen judgment. The ghosts of the fallen watch, their whispers carried by the wind. Will you mend the ring, or will you shatter it further? To walk the path of the Tarnished is to bear the knowledge that choice is both gift and curse. Every ending waits already written in the heart of the Erdtree, but which one becomes real depends not on destiny, but on understanding. The Tarnished's burden is not to win, but to discern, to see the world's brokenness not as failure, but as freedom disguised in ruin. And as the road winds towards Stormvale's towering gates, beneath the fading gold of twilight, the air grows still. The Erdtree's light flickers across the horizon, neither day nor night, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Somewhere beyond the fog, the past waits to be confronted, and with it, the first true test of grace. Perhaps that is why the Tarnished walks without rest, because deep within the hollow echo of their heart, they already know, To restore the world is to carry its sorrow. At the western edge of Limgrave, where the winds howl like mourning spirits and the cliffs drop sharply into the misted sea, there rises a fortress both magnificent and broken. Stormvale Castle looms against the horizon, its towers like the ribs of some long-dead giant, its banners tattered and whispering of victories that turn to rot. This was once the seat of a demigod, a place where gold and glory intertwined so tightly that they became indistinguishable from each other. Yet now, its corridors echo only with the footsteps of hollowed knights and the creak of doors that no longer open to welcome kings. Here, the Tarnished first encounters the true nature of ambition in the lands between. Stormvale is not simply a ruin, it is a reflection, a mirror in which every soul must confront its hunger for greatness. Its lord, Godric the Grafted, embodies this hunger in its most grotesque form. Once a noble descendant of the Golden lineage, Godric now walks as a twisted parody of his divine ancestry, his body a patchwork of stolen limbs and sinew. In his madness, he grafts the flesh of others to his own, believing that by taking from the strong, he can become worthy of the Erdtree's grace once more. Yet each limb he claims distances him further from what grace truly means. The Tarnished enters this fallen fortress under the shroud of storm and shadow. The gates, locked to outsiders, must be approached through hidden paths and forgotten passages. The walls seem alive, whispering the names of those who have died trying to ascend its heights. Guards patrol in endless repetition, their armor rusted but their faith unbroken, clinging to the illusion that their lord still stands as a symbol of divine power. The castle's architecture tells its story better than any inscription. Grand staircases leading to dead ends, gilded halls collapsing into darkness, courtyards where the grass has turned to ash. Stormvale was built to impress the gods, and in doing so forgot the mortals who lived within its shadow. As the Tarnished advances through its corridors, every encounter becomes a dialogue between pride and humility. The knights who attack do so not from hatred but from despair. They fight to preserve meaning in a world that has rendered their loyalty obsolete. Even the great beasts chained within the keep seem to share in this sorrow, their eyes dulled with the recognition that they are remnants of an age that has passed. Each confrontation becomes an act of mourning, as if the castle itself resists not out of malice, but out of refusal to be forgotten. When at last the Tarnished reaches the throne chamber, the storm outside roars in unison with the battle that follows. Godric, massive and trembling, raises his many arms toward the sky and calls upon the wind as though demanding the approval of gods who no longer listen. His words are pitiful, almost childlike. He speaks of lineage, of power, of legacy. "Witness me, ancestors. I am your rightful heir." But the storm does not answer. It only rages louder, drowning out his pleas. His attacks are wild, desperate, as though each swing is an attempt to carve his name into the bones of the world. And yet, beneath his bluster, there is a tremor of fear, the terror of one who knows that his strength is borrowed, his divinity counterfeit. In defeating Godric, the Tarnished does not simply claim victory over a foe. They bear witness to the truth that power without understanding is decay disguised as majesty. The moment Godric falls, the storm begins to ease, its fury dissolving into a gentle rain that washes the blood from the stone. It is as though the very sky mourns him, not for what he was, but for what he could never become. His body lies among the shattered remnants of his grafts, limbs reaching in every direction, as if even in death he still yearns to be more than himself. The Tarnished, standing before this broken god, feels the weight of what awaits them, the knowledge that every lord, every queen, every chosen vessel of grace bears the same flaw, the inability to accept that divinity, once sought, always consumes its seeker. And yet, within that tragedy lies understanding. Stormvale teaches that the pursuit of greatness is not inherently evil. It is the nature of all living things to strive, to grow, to ascend. But when that striving turns inward, when it becomes a desperate attempt to reclaim a light that was never meant to belong to one alone, it warps the soul. Godric's downfall is not that he sought strength, but that he mistook strength for worth. His castle stands as a monument to this confusion, each wall and courtyard whispering the same refrain, that glory, untempered by humility, becomes a prison of one's own making. As the Tarnished leave Stormvale behind, the storm clouds break apart, revealing a horizon washed in pale gold. The world feels larger now, the path forward uncertain but beckoning. Beyond the castle lies Liurnia of the Lakes, a vast drowned realm where moonlight replaces sunlight, and where knowledge, not might, holds sway. But the lessons of Stormveil linger like the echo of thunder. Every victory from here on will demand a choice between inheritance and transformation, between repeating the sins of the past or reshaping them into something new. In the quiet after battle, Melina's voice returns like a dream. She speaks not of triumph, but of direction. The path ahead is long, and the lords that remain will not yield easily. Yet remember, each shard of the ring you claim draws you closer to what waits within the Erdtree. Her words are calm, but in them lies a warning that to gather power is to invite the gaze of the divine once more, and that gaze has never known mercy. As night settles, the Tarnished rests beside a site of grace. The flicker of its golden light dances across their armor, soft and patient. For a moment, the storm's echo fades, and the only sound is the sea's endless sigh below. In that stillness, one might wonder whether grace is leading them forward, or merely watching, curious to see what they will do when faced with gods who bleed and humans who refuse to kneel. Stormveil falls silent behind them, its once proud towers now no more than silhouettes against a pale moon. The wind carries whispers through its hollow halls, murmuring the name of its broken king. Somewhere within that whisper lies a question, one that will haunt every Tarnished who follows. If even gods can be unmade by their longing to be whole, what hope remains for those who chase their light? The path winds onward into Liurnia, where reflection replaces ambition, and where the light of the moon will reveal that knowledge too carries its own curse. But before the Tarnished crosses into that silvered realm, they look back once more at Stormveil's shadow, an unspoken reminder that the first sin of the gods was not cruelty, but pride. And in that remembrance, the road ahead begins to shimmer again with the faint gold of grace, leading the weary traveler toward another forgotten truth, waiting just beyond the water's edge. Beyond the shattered gates of Stormveil, the air begins to change. The thunder fades, and the sharp scent of salt gives way to the faint aroma of damp stone and lilies. The terrain opens wide into Liurnia of the Lakes, a vast basin of silver water where ruins drift like memories half submerged. Mist coils around the low hills and the skeletal remains of towers that once shone with golden light. Now only the moon's reflection lingers upon the waves, soft and uncertain. Here, grace seems quieter, as if listening rather than speaking, content to watch rather than command. Liurnia is a place of scholars and dreamers, where ambition takes the shape of knowledge rather than conquest. Yet its peace is deceptive. Beneath the tranquil waters lie the bones of drowned cities, and above them the great academy of Raya Lucaria, fortress of the moon's disciples, still clings to its former glory. Once, this academy stood as the intellectual heart of the lands between, devoted not to the Erdtree's golden order, but to the cool light of the moon, a rival philosophy that sought truth through reflection rather than faith. Under the guidance of Queen Renala, the scholars of Raya Lucaria pursued sorcery not as rebellion, but as revelation, seeking to understand the hidden patterns of reality that Grace had overlooked. To enter the academy is to step into a world preserved in stasis. The air hums with old enchantments. The walls whisper with memory. Chandeliers hang over empty lecture halls, their candles flickering as if stirred by unseen hands. The Tarnished moves carefully through corridors lined with tomes that once promised enlightenment but now crumble into dust. Magic lingers in the air, its scent like iron and old rain. Every statue, every mosaic, depicts not gods in triumph but stars in motion, signs of a cosmos that once guided the scholar's gaze before the Erdtree dimmed their light. At the heart of the academy lies Renala, queen of the full moon. Once consort to Radagon, she now drifts through her memories like a spectre, tending to her reborn children in endless repetition. Her chamber, lit by the pale blue of moonlight filtering through stained glass, feels like a shrine to sorrow. Books float weightless around her, circling in patient orbits as she hums a lullaby that seems to echo through the ages. Her words to the Tarnished are gentle but lost. They speak of rebirth, of love, of the child she still hopes to save. Renala's sorcery, like her heart, is founded on the belief that death need not be the end. Her great rune grants rebirth itself, allowing life to begin anew, but never free of the memories that bind it. The battle against her is not one of malice, but of mercy. As she calls upon her spectral students and fractured moons, there is no rage in her face, only longing. When she falls, she does not curse the Tarnished, nor does she weep. She simply gazes upward, whispering the name of her lost son Radagon, who left her for the Erdtree, and Ranni, who turned her eyes to the stars. The victory feels hollow, for in defeating her, the Tarnished has not conquered evil, but sorrow itself. And yet, in the stillness after battle, the moonlight grows brighter, as if acknowledging that even broken dreams can illuminate the dark. Rennala offers the Tarnished the gift of rebirth, a chance to reshape themselves, to begin again. But this too is a lesson cloaked in melancholy. Rebirth cannot erase what has been, it can only rearrange it. The soul remains the same, even if the form changes. Her power is a reflection of the world's great truth, that no matter how one tries to restore order, every act of creation bears the memory of its own destruction. It is within Liurnia's misted valleys that the Tarnished begins to hear whispers of another name, spoken in reverent tones and fearful hush. Ranni the witch, daughter of Rennala, and bearer of a will that defied both moon and tree. While her mother clings to memories of the past, Ranni seeks liberation from the cycle itself. Her rebellion is not loud like Marika's shattering, but quiet, deliberate, and infinite in consequence. To follow Ranni is to follow a path of cold clarity, one that rejects the warmth of the Erdtree's light, in favor of the distant glow of the moon, serene, untouchable, eternal. The Tarnished's path through Liurnia becomes a descent through reflection itself. Each ruin tells the same story, faith undone by curiosity, love undone by understanding. The waters of the lake mirror the sky so perfectly that one cannot tell where heaven ends and earth begins. Here the boundaries between reality and dream grow thin. Grace flickers uncertain, as though testing the Tarnished's resolve. Do they still seek the golden order, or has the moon's soft light begun to whisper a different truth? As the Tarnished ventures deeper into the lake's forgotten depths, spectral figures emerge from the fog, sorcerers who died chasing knowledge, their eyes glowing with pale luminescence. They attack not out of anger but instinct, their minds trapped in eternal study. Each spell they cast feels like a question left unanswered, each death another thesis abandoned mid-thought. Through their tragedy, the Tarnished begins to understand the danger of enlightenment without empathy, that to know too much of the world's machinery is to forget the music that gives it life. Raya Lucaria, in its grandeur and decay, becomes a meditation on memory. Its halls echo not with the sound of combat, but with silence, a silence heavy with the weight of what once was. The moon that shines over its towers seems less a symbol of wisdom and more a reminder that knowledge too can wither under its own brilliance. The Tarnished walks its echoing corridors like a pilgrim through the ruins of thought, learning not from the living but from the ghosts of ideas that could not survive the light. When the Tarnished finally stands beneath the open sky once more, the moon hangs enormous and low, painting the world in shades of blue and silver. The Erdtree's golden glow shimmers faintly at the horizon, distant but unforgotten. Between these two lights, the cold reflection of the moon and the warm blaze of the tree, the Tarnished stands suspended, torn between two visions of order, one rooted in unity, the other in freedom, one golden, the other pale. Melina speaks softly at their side, her voice almost lost beneath the lapping of the lake. The moon teaches us to see in darkness, but even its light is borrowed. Her words linger, fragile as frost. It is a quiet warning that to reject the golden order is not to find truth, but merely another form of illusion. The Tarnished feels this truth deep within, that every path, however radiant, carries its own shadow. As they leave Liurnia behind, the reflection of the moon breaks upon the waves, scattering into 1,000 fragments of light. It is a vision that mirrors the world itself, beautiful, fractured, endlessly searching for wholeness. The road ahead leads toward the Altus Plateau, where the Erdtree dominates the sky once more, its golden light almost blinding after the soft luminescence of Liurnia's night. But as the Tarnished ascends from the lake's quiet depths, a single question rises with them, as haunting as the ripples they leave behind. When every light, be it sun, tree, or moon, is but a reflection of something greater, where does the true source of grace lie? In the dim stillness after Liurnia's soft rains, when the moon rests low against the horizon and the air carries the faint chill of otherworldly silence, the Tarnished first hears her voice. It is not a command nor a call, it is an invitation, quiet and deliberate, as though spoken from a place beyond time. Ranni the witch does not announce herself with power, but with poise. Her presence feels older than the stars, yet her form is small and fragile, a spectral woman draped in pale robes, her forearms folded as though she carries the weight of two lives. Her eyes, one bright and one shadowed, study the Tarnished not as a subject of destiny, but as a possible conspirator in something greater. something forbidden. Ranni's tale begins not in rebellion, but in love, a love so vast it transcends the gods who claim dominion over it. Born of Queen Rennala and Radagon, she is both moon and tree, reflection and root. Yet she chose neither. When her father returned to the Erdtree and her mother fell into mourning, Ranni looked upon the world of gold and saw not order, but imprisonment. She watched the greater will bend the living and the dead to its silent purpose, shaping eternity into chains of grace. And so she chose to die, not in despair, but in defiance. Her act of self-slaughter was not suicide, but metamorphosis. On the night of Black Knives, she stole a fragment of death itself, the rune of destined death, and bound it to mortal blades. With those blades, the demigods were struck down, and for the first time in the Age of Gold, gods bled as men. But in taking death into her own hands, Ranni also severed her connection to the greater will. Her mortal body perished, yet her spirit endured, inhabiting a doll of silver and silk, a vessel delicate enough to contain defiance without shattering. In that moment, she became something new. Not God, not ghost, but freedom given form. To serve Ranni is to enter a covenant with the unknown. Her realm is not of gold or flame, but of silence, shadow, and infinite stars. The tarnished, drawn by curiosity and quiet reverence, becomes her vassal, not by command, but by consent. In her chambers at Carrier Manor, beneath the fading banners of the moonlit dynasty, she speaks with a calmness that borders on sorrow. I was born of the moon and the Erdtree, yet bound by neither. I would see the order undone, that all may find peace beneath the eternal night. Her words carry both promise and peril. To follow her is to reject the grace that guides the tarnished, to walk a path not of restoration, but of release. Her companions too are reflections of this philosophy. Bled, her half-wolf guardian, loyal to the point of tragedy, represents devotion stripped of reason, his love for Ranni bound to a fate that will eventually consume him. Egi, the gentle giant smith, understands her cause and aids her quietly, his hammer striking with the rhythm of resignation. And Seluvis, cunning and cruel, seeks to twist Ranni's freedom into control, his puppet experiments mocking her own chosen existence. Together, they form a constellation of flawed loyalties orbiting a star that refuses to burn. The journey under Ranni's banner leads the tarnished away from the Erdtree's light and into the deep places of the world, where ancient cities sleep beneath stone and the sky folds inward like a forgotten dream. The Lake of Rot spreads its crimson sickness in silence, a reflection of what happens when divinity festers. The underground ruins of Nokron and Nokstella shimmer with alien architecture, relics of civilizations that dared to exist without grace. Here the stars themselves seem to hum in recognition, as if awakening to a long-forgotten harmony. The tarnished begins to see that Ranni's rebellion is not merely against the Golden Order, it is against the very hierarchy of existence. Her goal is not dominion, but equality. A cosmos without gods or masters, where every soul drifts freely in the endless dark, and yet beneath her serene composure lies a sorrow older than the Erdtree itself. Ranni knows that freedom requires sacrifice. To sever the influence of the greater will, she must first destroy the threads that bind all living things to its cycle. Her path demands the death of light, the silencing of grace, and the cold eternity of the stars. She will not reign in this new world, she will vanish within it. In choosing the night, she accepts solitude as her crown. Her love is not possessive, it is cosmic empathy, the understanding that true peace may only be found in distance. The tarnished's devotion to Ranni deepens through choice, not through oaths. Each step taken in her service strips away another layer of illusion. The gods of gold begin to look smaller, their light harsher. The Erdtree's radiance now feels like interrogation rather than warmth. Through her guidance, the tarnished begins to understand the paradox at the heart of all creation, that life's beauty exists only because it ends, and that eternity, once attained, rots. In the eternal night Ranni envisions, there is no grace to guide, no flame to consume, no will to command. It is a world where being itself becomes gentle, unshackled from divine expectation. Yet this vision, tranquil as it seems, carries a quiet terror. For to erase the influence of gods is also to erase the meaning they provided. Freedom without purpose is a vast, echoing silence. Even the stars, though countless, shine in isolation. As the tarnished aids Ranni in reclaiming her stolen destiny, fragments of the old world resist, Shades of the two fingers whisper of betrayal, trying to lure the Tarnished back toward the Erdtree. The spectral assassins of the Black Knife Order linger in the shadows, bound by guilt to the death they once unleashed. Blad begins to unravel, his loyalty tearing at the seams of his sanity. E.g., sensing the inevitable, reforges his weapons with trembling patience, knowing his master's fate is written in starlight. Each ally's fall becomes a verse in Ranni's silent hymn, a song not of triumph, but of farewell. The climax of her path unfolds beneath the surface of the world, where the last shards of the moon's light mingle with the whispers of the abyss. The Tarnished, having defied the Erdtree's call, pledges their fate to Ranni's eternal night. The act is quiet, almost tender. She takes their hand, her voice softer than wind through the leaves. And let us walk together, beneath the starless sky. There is no fanfare, no divine proclamation, only a silence that feels infinite, a peace that tastes like the first breath after sorrow. This is the age of the moon, a future not built upon conquest or flame, but upon withdrawal. The gods depart, the tree fades into shadow, and the stars reclaim their dominion. In this age, the Tarnished and Ranni become equals in solitude, drifting through eternity, not as rulers, but as wanderers among the dark. It is an ending not of victory, but of release, an escape from the endless cycle of suffering disguised as grace. And yet one might wonder whether this peace is truly peace, or simply another form of forgetting. The moon offers reflection, but not warmth. Its light reveals, but does not heal. Perhaps Ranni's rebellion is not the opposite of Marika's shattering, but its completion, a continuation of the same desperate yearning for freedom from the burden of divine perfection. For in the end, both god and witch sought the same thing, to break the chains of eternity, even if it meant being alone forever. As the Tarnished fades into the cold embrace of her starlit world, a single truth lingers like breath on glass, that love and rebellion are the same act, seen from different stars. And somewhere in the silence between constellations, the voice of grace grows still, listening, patient, waiting to see whether freedom, too, can bear the weight of endless night. Beyond the silvered mists of Liurnia, where moonlight begins to fade and the warmth of gold returns to the horizon, there rises a land that still clings to the illusion of divinity. The Altus Plateau unfolds beneath the Tarnished's weary steps like a gilded wound, its fields carpeted in yellow grass, its skies vast and cloudless, its every hill crowned with monuments to the gods who once ruled without question. It is beautiful, yes, but in that beauty there lingers an unease. For the plateau's golden hue is not the glow of life renewed, but the last shimmer of something dying in slow dignity. Here, the air hums faintly with Grace's memory. The light is not divine, it is residue. To reach this place, the Tarnished must ascend through the grand lift of Dectus, a machine older than the Erdtree's own roots. Two halves of a medallion, once separated by war and pride, must be reunited to activate its ancient mechanism. When the lift rises, it does so in solemn silence, a motion both triumphant and mournful. The Tarnished ascends not as conqueror, but as trespasser, crossing into the very domain of the gods they were banished from. As the platform lifts through drifting motes of dust, the world below recedes into haze, and the Erdtree looms ever closer, its trunk like a mountain carved from light, its branches swaying gently as though breathing. The first breath upon the plateau feels strangely familiar. The soil beneath the boots of the Tarnished hums faintly, as if echoing the pulse of something living deep within. The ruins that dot the landscape are not remnants of conquest, but of faith, shrines, altars and temples dedicated to Marika, to Radagon, to the unseen will that once governed them. Many of these are now empty shells, their statues cracked, their inscriptions half erased by wind. Pilgrims still wander here, eyes hollow yet fixed upon the distant glow of the Erdtree. Some pray aloud to gods who have long since ceased to listen. Others simply stare upward, waiting for salvation that never comes. In the distance, the capital of Leyndell gleams like a mirage. Its golden walls seem to rise straight out of the horizon, and from afar they look eternal. Yet as one draws near, the illusion falters. The marble is chipped, the banners torn, the air heavy with the scent of decay. The city stands proud, but its grandeur hides the quiet panic of a faith that no longer knows how to believe. The knights who guard its outskirts fight not for glory but for denial, to convince themselves that their order still holds meaning in a world where grace has grown silent. Before the Tarnished enters that sanctified ruin, the plateau reveals its first secret, the remnants of the tree sentinels, golden warriors whose armor catches the light like molten dawn. Once defenders of the Erdtree, they now wander aimlessly, their duty reduced to instinct. They do not question, they do not speak, they strike as if punishing intruders for witnessing the gods' humiliation. Each battle with them is less a contest of strength than a ceremony of remembrance. A recreation of wars fought long ago, when gold ruled the sky and the world bent beneath its radiance. When the last of these sentinels falls, the earth seems to sigh, as though releasing a burden carried too long. The Tarnished soon finds that the Altus Plateau is haunted not by ghosts of the dead, but by ghosts of devotion. Along its roads stand caravans of pilgrims, still marching though their priests lie long dead. Their bodies are twisted by faith unfulfilled, yet their songs continue, carried by the wind like fading hymns. In their voices lies the heart of the Golden Order's tragedy. That belief, once absolute, can outlive its object. These people are not fools, they are relics of sincerity, proof that even the cruelest gods can inspire love too deep to die with them. At the heart of the plateau stands the Altus Highway Junction, where paths diverge like veins leading to the heart of divinity. One road climbs toward Lanedel's gates, its stones polished smooth by centuries of worshippers seeking grace. The other winds toward the shaded castle, a fortress drowned in poison and regret. There, the Tarnished can sense the corruption festering beneath the golden ideal, the venom that seeps from perfection denied. The castle's walls glisten with toxic slime, its inhabitants disfigured not by sin but by faith gone stagnant. Here the Golden Order's reflection turns ugly, its purity twisted into something diseased. Even light, when hoarded too long, begins to rot. When the Tarnished rests by a sight of grace upon the plateau, Melina's voice returns once more, her tone more somber than before. The closer we draw to the Erdtree, she whispers, the more its shadow grows. She speaks of the Age of Order, the dream of those who still cling to the idea that the golden law can be restored. There are scholars and priests who labor in secret, reshaping the shattered commandments into new forms, hoping that structure might save what spirit has lost. But even they know the truth they cannot speak aloud. That order, once broken, can never be restored without first understanding why it shattered. It is here, amid this gilded silence, that the Tarnished begins to glimpse the dual nature of the Erdtree. From a distance, it is a beacon. Up close, it is a cage. Its roots dig deep into the earth, not merely to nourish but to bind. Its branches reach across the sky, not only to shelter but to dominate. Every ray of its light carries judgment. Every shadow it casts hides rebellion. The Tarnished can feel it now, a subtle pressure in the chest, a quiet voice at the edge of hearing. The greater will still watches, patient as time, waiting to see whether this wanderer will kneel or defy. In the outskirts of Lanedel, where golden ash drifts through the streets like snow, the Tarnished meets the remnants of those who served the gods most faithfully. They do not call themselves cursed, but chosen, even in ruin. Some speak of Marika as a mother still grieving. Others whisper that Radagon remains her mirror, her punishment, her penance. Statues depict them together, their forms blending, two faces sharing one body. The theology of the Golden Order was built upon this unity, a perfection born from contradiction. Yet what the faithful once saw as harmony, the Tarnished now recognizes as fracture disguised as grace. In time, the Tarnished will come to understand that the plateau is not merely a physical threshold, but a spiritual one. It is the last place where belief still holds shape, where the illusions of gold can still be mistaken for truth. Beyond it lies the heart of the Erdtree, where the divine mask finally falls. But for now, the Tarnished walks among ruins, gilded in sunlight, hearing in every fluttering banner the faint echo of prayers that have forgotten their meaning. As evening falls, the plateau glows like a dying ember, its beauty serene, its sadness profound. The wind carries whispers of an older song, one that once promised eternity, now reduced to refrain. O Erdtree, radiant and merciful, guide us once more, but no voice answers. The light dims, the shadows lengthen, and somewhere in that quiet, the Tarnished feels the weight of choice again, to serve what remains of the Golden Order, or to become the shadow that finally teaches it humility. The road to Lanedel stretches ahead, paved with gold and sorrow, and at its end, the gates of the capital glimmer faintly, as if aware that one more pilgrim approaches, a wanderer who may either rekindle the dying light or snuff it out forever. The golden walls of Lanedel rise from the earth like a monument to divine arrogance. their gleam soft and deceptive beneath the waning light. From afar, the city appears eternal, its towers laced with sunlight, its vast tree shadow crowning it in a halo of sanctity. But as the Tarnished draws near, the illusion peels away like old paint. The air grows thick with incense and ash. The cobblestones, once swept by priests, are cracked and overgrown. The chants of worship have fallen silent, leaving only the hollow echo of footsteps that once belonged to saints. The capital still stands, but it stands hollow, a cathedral of forgotten prayers, where faith lingers as a kind of haunting. Leyndell was once the heart of the Golden Order, the radiant jewel of Marika's reign. Every brick of its grand avenues was laid in reverence to the Erdtree, every spire pointing heavenward in silent testimony to the greater will. Within its labyrinthine streets, the hierarchy of gods and mortals was once enforced with immaculate precision. Priests and nobles at the top, warriors below, peasants kneeling in the dust. The air itself was said to shimmer with grace, but now grace flickers like dying embers, its light fractured into 1,000 competing truths. The city is no longer governed by law, it is haunted by memory. The Tarnished enters through the great western gate, where colossal guardians once stood as symbols of divine authority. Their faces have been eroded by time, their expressions lost, leaving only the suggestion of mourning in their stony features. Inside, the city sprawls like a labyrinth designed to confuse all who dare trespass. Golden domes rise above narrow alleys where the faithful once gathered in song. Now the hymns are replaced by the clanging of distant armor, the scraping of blades, and the hiss of spirits trapped between devotion and despair. The air smells of incense, blood, and rot, the scent of faith that has outlived its god. The first true encounter within the city is with its knights, once paragons of grace, now bound to the corpses of their ideals. They move with a kind of melancholy precision, striking not in hatred but in ritual. Every blow feels like an echo of worship, every parry a desperate plea to be remembered. To kill them is to participate in a ceremony of ending, to put to rest a faith too proud to die on its own. Yet even as their bodies crumble into gold dust, their armor glows faintly, as if unwilling to release the memory of divinity. At the heart of Leyndell stands the massive dragon corpse coiled around the city's outer wall, its wings petrified mid-scream. Its body has fused with the very stone, as if the city itself was built atop its carcass. This dragon is not an enemy to be fought, but a symbol, an ancient creature that once defied the Erdtree's will and was struck down for its insolence. Now in death, it serves as foundation. Its bones are the scaffolding of faith itself, rebellion transmuted into reverence. The Tarnished walks upon its spine without realizing it, each footstep echoing across the centuries of contradiction that define the Golden Order. Deeper within the capital, the Tarnished ascends stairways lined with statues of Marika and Radagon, their visages carved so seamlessly that it becomes impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. The people of the Golden Order believed this unity was divine perfection, the joining of masculine and feminine, order and chaos, faith and reason. But the Tarnished, guided by experience rather than dogma, begins to see something else, a fracture disguised as fusion, two wills forced into one vessel, neither at peace, both pretending harmony while waging an eternal war within. Melina's voice returns here, low and distant, almost hesitant. This city was built to honor the gods, she says, but perhaps it only buried them instead. She warns that the closer they draw to the Erdtree, the heavier its shadow will become. The Tarnished feels this truth in every corridor, each one narrowing, darkening, pressing inward as if the architecture itself is trying to contain what cannot be contained. At the city's core lies the great dragon-scarred battleground, where Morgott, the Omen King, waits. He is the last true guardian of the Erdtree, and perhaps the last being in the lands between who still believes in its righteousness. Cursed from birth, hidden beneath the capital he defended, Morgott was denied grace even as he dedicated his existence to preserving it. His grotesque form, half god, half monster, embodies the hypocrisy of the order he serves. When he stands before the Tarnished, it is not as an enemy, but as a prophet consumed by devotion. I was born of the Erdtree's grace, yet it rejected me, he growls, voice trembling with fury and faith alike. Still I defend it, for none shall touch the tree but me. The battle with Morgott feels more like a liturgy than a fight. Every strike is punctuated by words of belief, every moment of silence heavy with prayer. His blood burns gold, and his dying breath rises like incense toward the heavens. When he falls, the air grows still, and for a fleeting instant, the Erdtree seems to mourn him. The Tarnished kneels amid the ruins of that sacred duel, realizing that Morgott was not the tree's protector, but its victim, Faith's last disciple consumed by its own fire. After Morgott's fall, the way to the Erdtree stands open, or so it seems. The Tarnished climbs the final staircase to the tree's great gate, where light pours down in blinding columns. But when they approach, the golden bark hardens, sealing the entrance. The Erdtree rejects them. No matter how pure their purpose, no matter how powerful their runes, the tree will not allow them entry. The message is clear. The divine will no longer accept mortal hands. The Tarnished, for all their triumphs, remains outside, a pilgrim on the threshold of heaven, barred by heaven itself. In that denial lies revelation. The Erdtree's light, which once promised salvation, now feels oppressive, a sun that refuses to set. The Tarnished sees it now not as a beacon, but as a wall. It is perfection, refusing evolution, eternity refusing mercy. Marika's rebellion begins to make sense in that blinding glow. Her shattering of the Elden Ring was not destruction but compassion, a desperate act to give the world back its right to change. Melina, standing beside the Tarnished, gazes upon the sealed door with quiet resignation. "Then it shall burn," she says, almost to herself. "Only fire can grant passage." Her tone carries neither anger nor fear, only inevitability. The Tarnished understands. The journey ahead will no longer be about serving grace, but transcending it. To open the path to the divine, they must commit the unthinkable. They must set the sacred tree aflame. As night falls upon Leyndell, the once golden city seems to shimmer like a candle about to die. The streets are empty now, save for the faint drifting of golden ash, like the last remnants of a dream. The Tarnished rests beneath a quiet sky, the Erdtree towering above, unyielding and magnificent. And in the silence that follows Morgott's death, one question begins to echo through the heart of the world. If the gods will not open their gates, what is left for those who still dare to knock? The answer waits far to the north, in the forbidden mountain that burns, a land where the Erdtree's roots end and its ashes begin. It is there that grace will either be rekindled or extinguished, and the fate of all the lands between will be decided in flame. Beyond Leyndell's smoldering silence, where golden light turns to ashen grey, the Tarnished's path bends ever upward into the ancient desolation of the north. The air grows thin here, the warmth of grace fades, replaced by the biting wind of a land long exiled from the world's mercy. Snow drifts endlessly across the horizon, blanketing the ruins of forgotten wars. The sun, pale and distant, struggles to pierce the clouds. This is the mountaintops of the giants, a realm where time itself seems to sleep beneath the ice, and where even the gods avert their gaze. Few beings remain here who remember when this land was alive. Once the giants were keepers of flame, guardians of a primordial fire that burned with the power to rival even the Erdtree's light. They were not cruel, nor envious. They were stewards of destruction, understanding that to burn was not to end but to begin again. The Greater Will, fearing their knowledge, waged war against them in the early ages of gold. The fire was deemed heretical, a force too wild for Order's design, and so the Erdtree's champions, led by Queen Marika's forces, slew the giants and buried their flame beneath frost and silence. Only a few remnants remained, ashes of a kind of wisdom the world no longer dared to remember. As the Tarnished ascends the snow-swept paths, they walk through the bones of a civilization erased by divine decree. Colossal skulls jut from the ice, their empty eyes gazing eternally toward the south, where the Erdtree's light still burns. The wind moans through their hollows, and in that sound, one can almost hear a lament, not of defeat, but of pity. The giants understood something that neither Marika nor the Greater Will ever could, that creation and destruction are not opposites but partners. Without fire, gold grows brittle. Without death, grace loses meaning. The journey through these peaks is slow and perilous. Ancient warriors, preserved in ice, awaken to challenge the intruder. They are not mindless, their attacks are ritual, their movements deliberate. They defend the silence of this place, not out of hate for the Tarnished, but out of respect for what the giants once were. Each encounter feels less like battle and more like inheritance. Each strike a dialogue between past and present, between what was and what still refuses to die. High above, the sky begins to shimmer with a strange light, ribbons of color flickering like auroras, fragments of grace that have escaped the Erdtree's reach. Here, even grace seems uncertain, its direction lost amid the snow. Melina walks beside the Tarnished, her voice a faint warmth against the wind. "This is where the Erdtree's shadow ends," she says. "To go further is to stand outside of its sight. Only fire can open the way now." Her words carry sorrow, not resolve. She knows what must be done, and she knows what it will cost. At the heart of the mountain lies the Forge of the Giants, a crater vast enough to swallow cities. It glows faintly red beneath layers of snow, as though the mountain itself still dreams of the fire once kindled there. The last surviving giant guards it, his body immense, his eyes dim with the centuries. He no longer fights for vengeance, but for meaning. "The flame is sealed," he rumbles, voice deep as the earth. "We burned once for the world's renewal. Now the gods fear it. You would bring ruin again." His question is not accusation, it is prayer. To set the Erdtree aflame, the Tarnished must rekindle this ancient fire, but to do so requires sacrifice. Melina steps forward, calm and radiant even as the wind tears at her cloak. "I was born for this," she says quietly. "The flame will take me, but through it, the path will open for you." Her eyes, unseeing, turn toward the heavens. "This is the purpose grace gave me, to burn, that the world may awaken." The Tarnished cannot dissuade her. Her will is resolute, her peace terrifying in its purity. The giant kneels in solemn acknowledgement, his hand trembling as he opens the forge. Fire erupts not in fury, but in grief. It is not the wild, consuming blaze of chaos, but a deep, ancient warmth that speaks of endings fulfilled. Melina walks into it without hesitation. Her form is consumed, her voice rising one final time through the crackle of flame. "I will see you again, in the time beyond grace." The world seems to pause as the fire spreads, reaching upward, cutting through the clouds, staining the snow with gold and red. The Erdtree, far away on the horizon, shudders. Its branches quiver like a creature in pain. The light that once emanated from it now seems to recoil inward, retreating from the inevitable. When the fire subsides, silence returns. The forge stands blackened and still, its guardian gone to ash. The Tarnished, alone now, carries within them the faint echo of the flame's warmth. The path to the Erdtree has been opened, not by divine permission, but by mortal defiance. Yet as the wind shifts, something else begins to stir, a presence older and deeper than the fire itself. The ground trembles. In the distance, a faint glow of crimson flickers through the storm. The frenzied flame, the power long whispered of in fear, has awoken, drawn by the rekindling of ruin. The Tarnished feels its pull like a heartbeat beneath the snow, a rhythm both seductive and dreadful. The flame whispers not of order nor of freedom, but of dissolution, an end to all boundaries, all separations, all pain. "Why rebuild?" it seems to murmur, "when you can be free of the burden of building at all?" It promises release not through grace, but through annihilation. Its warmth is not comfort, but erasure. Here the journey divides. One path leads back toward the Erdtree, to confront what remains of the gods. The other descends into the depths below the capital, where the frenzied flame waits with its promise of total unmaking. In this moment, the Tarnished stands between two fires, one born of duty, the other of despair. Both burn with the same truth, that to create anything worth saving, something must first be destroyed. Snow begins to fall again, gently, as though the world itself wishes to forget what it has just witnessed. The mountains return to silence, but their memory lingers. The ashes of the giants swirl in the wind, drifting like ghostly embers. They do not mourn their extinction, they understand it. Their flame was never meant to rule, it was meant to remind. The Tarnished, walking away from the forge, feels that lesson settle deep within, that fire is not the enemy of grace but its shadow. Without it, grace cannot change. Without change, life cannot continue. As the horizon darkens, the Erdtree looms once more, its vast crown haloed by the faint reflection of the giant's dying blaze. The world is waiting now, watching to see whether the Tarnished will use fire to cleanse or to consume. Somewhere beneath the snow and ash, the last whisper of Melina's voice lingers, soft as a prayer. "Burn what must burn, but do not forget what warmth was for." And so the Tarnished descends from the mountains, bearing within their soul both the light of sacrifice and the shadow of temptation. The road ahead winds toward the end of all things, where the divine and the human, the sacred and the profane, will finally meet in the same flame. Beneath the gleaming grandeur of Leyndell, beneath even the Erdtree's deepest roots, there exists a realm the gods refuse to acknowledge, a place of heat and hunger, where divinity dissolves into madness. It is said that this fire existed before the Erdtree's birth, before grace ever claimed dominion over life and death. It does not burn to purify, nor to destroy, but to consume. This is the Frenzied Flame, the primordial will of dissolution, the final answer to the tyranny of order. Those who descend to seek it do not walk as pilgrims, but as exiles who have stared too long into the light and found it blinding. The tarnished, following the whispers left in ash and ruin, finds themselves drawn to the subterranean depths of the capital. The air grows heavy as they descend, the golden luster of the upper world giving way to a dull, reddish glow that pulses like a heartbeat. Stone walls twist and warp, carved not by hands but by something that moved through the rock with purpose older than thought. There is no music here, only the low hum of a fire that should not be. The tunnels seem endless, spiraling ever downward, as if the world itself is leading the wanderer back to the womb of chaos. At the bottom lies the Cathedral of the Forsaken, a ruin buried beneath time's indifference. Its pillars lean inward, as if cowering from the thing it was built to contain. The tarnished walks through its echoing halls, the ground trembling softly underfoot. And then, in silence, the stone gives way to flesh. The walls begin to breathe, the air thick with the scent of burning marrow. Before them stands a door unlike any other, not made of metal or wood, but of scarred skin. It throbs faintly, alive and waiting. Behind it, the frenzied flame burns, patient and hungry. To open this door is to unmake oneself. The three fingers, emissaries of that forbidden will, await with outstretched limbs, their flesh blistered and peeling like parchment in the fire's heat. They do not speak, they do not need to. Their message is felt, not heard, a flood of sensation that invades the mind like molten glass. The tarnished can resist, or they can yield. Resistance means remaining whole but haunted, the memory of the flame gnawing at the edges of thought. To yield is to become something else entirely. When the tarnished accepts the flame, the transformation is both agony and revelation. The fire does not burn the flesh, it rewrites it. It seeps into the soul, erasing boundaries, identities, and histories. For a moment, every sorrow, every victory, every name feels irrelevant. There is no self, no God, no world, only heat. It whispers in the depths of consciousness, not in command, but in compassion, twisted beyond recognition. You have suffered enough, it murmurs. All have suffered enough. Let the suffering end. Let all things melt into mercy. But the mercy it offers is annihilation. In its philosophy there is no pain, because there are no beings left to feel it, no death, because there is no life. The frenzied flame promises a world without division, where even the gods themselves will dissolve into the same infinite warmth. It is perhaps the most seductive form of salvation ever conceived, the promise of peace without memory. Yet beneath its gentleness lies a horror that even the gods feared, that love, taken to its absolute extreme, becomes indistinguishable from madness. As the tarnished stands engulfed by the fire's glow, visions flood the mind. The Erdtree burns in golden silence, its branches curling inward like dying hands. The stars fall from the sky, one by one, until only the red glare of ruin remains. Rivers boil, stone melts, and all boundaries between life and death, heaven and earth, blur into one endless horizon of flame. Yet through it all there is no sound of screams, no cries of anguish, only the quiet hum of completion. The world in its own way has finally found rest. When the vision fades, the tarnished awakes marked by the fire's brand. Their eyes flicker with molten gold, their veins pulsing with the slow rhythm of something no longer entirely mortal. They feel no pain, no fear, only an overwhelming clarity, a stillness so profound it borders on emptiness. Melina's voice, faint and distant, reaches through that silence. You have chosen ruin. Her tone trembles, not with anger, but with sorrow deeper than death. Yet even ruin has its purpose. If you must burn the world, let it at least be for something worth remembering. The path forward from the Cathedral of the Forsaken leads not upward, but outward, back toward the lands between, where the Erdtree still towers in defiance. But the tarnished now carries within them, the seed of its undoing. The frenzied flame whispers constantly, a second consciousness breathing behind every thought. It does not demand, it seduces. Why rebuild the ring, it asks. Why mend the order that bound you? Let it all fall away. Let there be no gods, no laws, no sorrow. The tarnished must bear this voice like a curse, for to silence it is to silence themselves. As they walk once more under the open sky, the world seems changed. The light of the Erdtree feels dimmer, the stars above distant and cold. Even the wind carries an edge of unease, as though it senses the fire coiled within. Every living thing recoils subtly as the tarnished passes. The beasts howl, the trees shudder, the sights of grace flicker uncertainly, as if unsure whether to guide or to flee. The journey that once felt divine now feels apocalyptic. The tarnished steps leave faint scorch marks in the snow, the path behind them smoldering faintly in their wake, and yet within that desolation, there remains the smallest trace of humanity, a flicker that refuses to die. It is the same instinct that drove Marika to shatter the ring, that led Ranni to reject the gods, that made Melina offer herself to the flame, the desire not merely to end, but to understand. The frenzied flame offers the illusion of peace, but perhaps peace without memory is not peace at all. Perhaps the act of burning is not about destruction, but about witnessing to see, one final time, everything that was, and to understand why it could not last. As the tarnished continues onward, they find remnants of others who sought the same truth. Hermits who burned their eyes out to glimpse the madness beyond. Zealots whose laughter echoes endlessly across the ash. In their laughter lies revelation, that sanity, like grace, is just another form of control. And yet, even they, for all their devotion, tremble before the flame's totality. None can embrace it fully and remain. Only one touched by both grace and ruin, both mercy and defiance, can carry such fire without becoming its ash. At the edge of the northern sky, the Erdtree looms once more. Its branches glow faintly in the distance, golden against the dark, but for the first time, its light seems to waver, as though sensing what approaches. The tarnished pauses upon a frozen ridge, the wind whipping through the torn cloak, the fire within pulsing like a second heart. In that moment, the world feels balanced on a single breath. To walk forward is to end it all. To turn away is to let it rot. The choice, once dictated by grace, now belongs to the one who was never meant to choose. The frenzied flame whispers softly, almost tenderly, mercy lies in ending. Melina's voice, faint as snow, answers from memory. Mercy lies in enduring. Between them, the tarnished stands, a living contradiction, a vessel of both light and fire. Somewhere, deep within, a decision begins to form, and in that silence before the final march toward the Erdtree, the world itself seems to wait, snow unmoving, wind hushed, stars dim. For the first time since the Age of Gold began, the fate of creation does not rest in the hands of gods, but in the heart of something far more fragile, a mortal soul caught between grace and madness, light and mercy, fire and ruin. The tarnished returns at last to the foot of the Erdtree, where gold and ash converge beneath an endless sky. What once shone with the serenity of paradise now burns with the restless light of judgment. The air itself trembles under the weight of the tree's divinity, every leaf whispering the memory of gods who ruled too long. The tarnished stands before its great sealed gate once more, the bark pulsing faintly with light that no longer feels like grace but resistance. Behind it, eternity waits, unmoving, refusing to allow the living inside. But this time, the tarnished does not come with reverence. They come bearing fire. The embers of the forge of the giants still smolder within the soul, embers that carry the scent of sacrifice and sorrow. Melina's parting words echo faintly in memory, her voice intertwined with the crackle of flame. Burn what must burn, but remember what warmth was for. Now, standing in the shadow of divinity, the meaning of that promise unfurls like smoke. To burn the Erdtree is not simply an act of destruction, it is an act of revelation. The gods built their order upon the illusion that light could last forever. The tarnished comes to remind them that even light must die to remain true. The first spark touches the roots, and the Erdtree shudders. The ground groans as if the very world feels pain. Flame creeps upward, in slow reverence, licking across the bark, turning gold to crimson, and crimson to black. The sound is not of crackling wood, but of something deeper, the unraveling of faith itself. Each leaf ignites like a prayer finally answered, each ember a confession long delayed. For a brief moment, The night sky turns to daylight, and daylight to memory. The Erdtree burns not in silence, but in song, a hymn of ending that reaches every corner of the lands between. In distant Liurnia, the lakes shimmer red. In Caelid, where rot already reigns, the flame merges with corruption until even decay seems sanctified. In Nokron's sleeping ruins, the stones tremble as though remembering a time before the gods. The fire does not discriminate. It consumes not only the world's sin, but its beauty. And yet, within that destruction, there is peace, an understanding that what ends also makes room for what may come after. The fire is not hatred, it is mercy, in its truest and most terrifying form. As the Erdtree's outer shell collapses, its light flares violently, striking against the stars like a dying sun. The Tarnished stands amid the inferno, eyes reflecting both horror and awe. The heat sears flesh, but the soul feels only stillness. The power that once demanded obedience now crumbles into dust around them. In that moment, every god, every demigod, every creature born of grace feels the same truth. The order is ending. The greater will, watching from its distant, unknowable place beyond the stars, remains silent. It neither mourns nor intervenes. Perhaps it understands that this too was part of its design, that even divinity must face the cycle it imposed on others. When the flames settle, the once majestic tree stands blackened and hollow, its branches charred against a blood-red sky. The ash that falls is not cold, it glows faintly, as though reluctant to forget what it once was. The lands between lie in eerie stillness. The roar of the inferno fades, replaced by the faint murmur of the wind moving through the hollow trunk. The Tarnished steps forward through the cinders, the ground soft and warm beneath their feet. Every breath feels heavy, filled with the ghosts of countless prayers. And there, within the hollow heart of the Erdtree, the truth of its divinity reveals itself. There is no throne, no radiant god waiting to reward the faithful. Only ruin, beautiful, terrible ruin. The corpses of the divine lie entwined, Radagon and Marika, one body, two wills forever locked in mutual defiance. Their form flickers in the firelight, faces shifting between love and hatred, mercy and judgment. They are both victim and tyrant, creators of a law that demanded perfection and destroyers of all who failed to meet it. The Tarnished looks upon them and sees the reflection of every soul who ever tried to please an unpleasable god. From their fused remains, a voice echoes not sound but thought. Behold our grace, it whispers. Behold our failure. The words are neither confession nor curse. They are acknowledgement, the admission that even divinity, once embodied, becomes flawed. The Tarnished, standing before the ruin of perfection, understands at last what the Elden Ring truly was. Not a symbol of harmony, but a prison built of laws too sacred to question. Its shattering was not a fall from grace, but the beginning of freedom. The battle that follows feels inevitable. The body of Marika and Radagon stirs, animated not by life but by the residue of divine purpose. Their blows fall like falling stars, each one carrying the weight of millennia. The Tarnished moves through fire and ash, each strike a confrontation, not with a god, but with the part of themselves that still longs for certainty. The clash is not fury, it is lamentation, the final movement in a symphony of endings. When at last the divine vessel falls, its light does not fade but disperses, scattering into countless motes that drift upward into the hollow sky. Silence follows. For the first time in ages, the lands between has no ruler, no law, no order, only possibility. The Tarnished stands amid the ashes, the last light of the Erdtree flickering in their eyes. The power of the Elden Ring lies before them now, its fragments glowing faintly in the dust. To claim it is to define what will come next, to choose the meaning of existence itself. The choices unfold like constellations in the smoke, to restore the golden order, to embrace the cold of the moon, to drown the world in despair, or to let it fall into flame. Each path carries truth, each carries ruin. In this stillness, the frenzied flame stirs faintly within the Tarnished's chest. Its warmth tempts, whispering that this could be the final end, an end to endings, a mercy beyond comprehension. Yet another presence lingers too, the memory of Melina, her voice softer than ash. "Do not let the fire devour you," she once said. "Let it guide, but not consume." Between those two fires, the madness of mercy and the tenderness of sacrifice, the Tarnished must choose what kind of god they will become. if any at all. The world around them exhales, the wind carrying away the last embers of the divine. The Erdtree stands as a monument of shadow, and the stars above glimmer faintly through the haze. The age of gold is over, its brilliance reduced to memory, yet the ruins still breathe, quietly, patiently, as though waiting to be named again. The tarnished kneels in the ashes, their reflection flickering across the scorched earth, and for the first time there is no voice of grace to answer, only their own. And somewhere beyond the reach of the burnt horizon, a new sound begins to rise, a pulse, faint and steady, like the heartbeat of a world not yet born. The age of the Erdtree has ended. What follows will depend not on gods, but on the will of the one who dared to burn them. In the wake of the Erdtree's burning, when gold had turned to grey and the sky hung heavy with ash, the lands between fell into a silence so complete it bordered on divine. The light that once streamed endlessly from the tree now flickered only in memory, and the air once perfumed by the sweetness of grace tasted of soot and rain. The tarnished stood at the heart of that stillness, surrounded by what remained of gods and dreams alike. Where once the greater will had dictated every breath, now there was only absence, a vast, echoing space waiting to be filled. It is said that the first dawn after the burning did not come easily. The sky, uncertain of its purpose without the Erdtree's glow, lingered between night and day, as if reluctant to begin again. The stars dimmed, unsure whether to rise or rest. Even the wind hesitated, carrying whispers of confusion across the ashen plains. The lands between had become a world without direction, stripped of grace and cast into the raw vulnerability of freedom. For the first time, every creature, every remnant, every soul, divine or mortal, was forced to ask the same question: what now? The age of fracture begins in this uncertainty. It is not an age of triumph, nor of ruin, but of rebuilding, a hesitant step into the unknown. The tarnished, standing amid the ruins of divinity, gathers the fragments of the Elden Ring, not as an act of restoration, but of necessity. The ring's shards glimmer faintly, pulsing like the pieces of a broken heart. They hum with a power that has forgotten what it was meant to be. As the tarnished reaches for them, the air stirs. The world recognizes them, not as a servant of the greater will, but as its replacement. And so the act of mending begins. But this mending is imperfect, deliberate in its imperfection. The tarnished does not seek to restore the old order, nor to erase its lessons. They bind the shards with their own will, their own understanding of what it means to exist in a world where gods can fall. Each piece of the ring fuses with human intent, with frailty, with the quiet acceptance that nothing eternal can ever be kind. The light that emerges from their hands is not the gold of the Erdtree, but a softer hue, pale, uncertain, and alive. As the new Elden Ring takes shape, its influence ripples outward. Across the lands between, the remnants of life begin to stir. Grass sprouts through the ash. The lakes of Liurnia reflect a dim blue once more. The ruins of Leyndell hum faintly, as if remembering how to breathe. But these renewals are fragile, uneven, incomplete. The gods do not return. The greater will remains silent. There are no more blessings, no divine laws carved into the fabric of existence. What arises instead is a different kind of order, mortal, mutable, imperfect. The people who remain, those scattered survivors, those who lived through fire and silence, begin to shape their own faiths in the absence of one. Some pray to the charred husk of the Erdtree, believing it still listens. Others turn their eyes to the stars, hoping for a new god to descend. Still others follow the tarnished, seeing in them the spark of something they cannot name. But the tarnished, now Elden Lord, offers no commandments, no promises of paradise. They rule not through fear or favor, but through example, the simple act of enduring. This is the essence of the Age of Fracture, a world mended but not healed, alive but no longer eternal. It is an age defined by honesty. For the first time, the people of the lands between live without illusion. They understand that every order is temporary, that every light eventually fades, and in that understanding they find a kind of peace deeper than faith, a peace born not of perfection but of acceptance. Yet beneath that quiet, something restless stirs. The ashes of the Erdtree still glow faintly, their warmth not entirely gone. The soil remembers its golden years. Even in death, the divine refuses to stay buried. Whispers circulate among the remnants of the faithful that the greater will has not departed, only withdrawn, that the Erdtree's roots still reach deep into the world, feeding upon memory. The tarnished knows this too. In their dreams, they sometimes hear a heartbeat, a faint rhythmic pulse beneath the ground, as if the world itself resists being reborn without the gods' permission. The new Elden Ring shines dimly, its form incomplete, its geometry strange. The runes shift constantly, as if rewriting themselves to adapt to human thought. What was once a perfect circle now bears cracks, intentional and true. It no longer binds the world in absolute harmony, but allows it to breathe, to change. Seasons return. Mortality, once suppressed, reclaims its place as part of the natural rhythm. The people grow old and die, and in their deaths, the world finds balance. For the first time, death is not seen as failure, but as fulfillment, a necessary return to the soil that now belongs to everyone, not just the chosen. Still, not all welcome this fragile freedom. In the shadowed corners of the world, remnants of the old order conspire to restore the golden law. They whisper of purity, of unity, of the divine right that must be reclaimed. Priests of ash and knights of memory scour the lands, seeking the tarnished who dared to mend the ring in their own image. They see imperfection as blasphemy. They long for the return of control, and thus, even in this new dawn, the cycle of belief and rebellion begins again. The tarnished watches these movements with quiet resignation. They do not seek to suppress them. They understand now that even opposition is part of creation, that every dream of order contains its own seeds of chaos. Perhaps this, more than anything, is what separates the mortal from the divine, the ability to let the world move without demanding it stay still. As seasons pass, the memory of fire becomes legend. Children are told that once the sky itself burned, and that a wanderer of no name and no grace stood in the center of that storm and rebuilt the world from its ashes. They do not know whether to call that figure savior or destroyer. In truth, it does not matter. The tarnished is neither. They are simply the proof that even a broken world can choose to continue. The age of fracture endures, fragile but free. The Erdtree's shadow still stretches across the horizon, but now it is only shadow, an echo, not a command. And somewhere deep within the earth, beneath layers of ash and time, the last embers of the greater will flicker uncertainly, unsure whether to awaken or to sleep forever. The tarnished stands upon a cliff overlooking what remains of the lands between. The wind moves softly through the dead grass. The horizon glows faintly where the sun struggles to rise through haze. It is not a perfect dawn, but it is real, and in that imperfection lies the first true miracle the world has ever known. Yet even now, as the tarnished watches the new age unfold, they cannot shake a lingering question, one that whispers not from gods or flame, but from the quiet within. If every age must end, then what keeps the heart of the world beating between them? Is it grace? Is it defiance? Or is it something simpler, something profoundly human, the will to remember what was lost, even as one learns to let it go? When the ashes of the Erdtree had settled, and the light of the age of fracture dimmed into weary calm, there arose among the survivors a yearning, a familiar ache that echoed across centuries. Humanity, it seemed, could not dwell forever in the uncertainty of freedom. For some, the silence of the gods was a liberation. For others, it was an unbearable void. In that emptiness, new voices began to whisper of restoration, of a world without chaos, of a perfection that could be rebuilt. And thus, from the remnants of the old faith, the dream of the Age of Order was born. It began quietly, almost innocently. Scholars in the ruins of Lanedell gathered fragments of the old scriptures, brushing soot from golden tablets long buried. They spoke not of conquest or punishment, but of healing, a restoration of the sacred geometry that had once bound the lands between. To them, the shattering of the Elden Ring had been a wound in the very fabric of reality, and the tarnished's imperfect repair, though merciful, was a sign that the world still limped, half-healed and half-lost. These scholars called themselves the Harmonists. They believed the greater will had not vanished but fallen silent, waiting for mortal hearts to rediscover the pattern of divine law through reason rather than revelation. At first, their work was philosophical. They gathered in halls lit by the flicker of oil lamps, reciting the old runes and seeking to decode their meaning without divine guidance. Their words were gentle, their tone measured. They spoke of balance, of symmetry, of the possibility of a peace unmarred by the passions of gods or men. But slowly, inevitably, their dream hardened into doctrine. The world had not forgotten how to crave authority. The Harmonists began to see themselves as more than interpreters. they became architects. If grace would not return, they would recreate it. In the quiet valleys beyond the ruined capital, they built a temple, not to Marika, but to the idea of order itself. The walls were of white stone, smooth and precise, carved to exact ratios that mirrored the runes of the Elden Ring. There was no altar, no idols, no flame, only stillness. Worshippers gathered not to pray, but to align, standing in geometric formations meant to reflect cosmic harmony. For a time, this new discipline seemed to bring peace. Farmers found comfort in its predictability. Warriors found purpose in its hierarchy. Even the air within the temple felt calm, as though the world itself exhaled in relief. But beneath that calm, an old unease stirred. The more perfectly the harmonists pursued symmetry, the less they seemed to tolerate anything that did not fit their pattern. Imperfection became impurity. Emotion became error. Those who questioned the doctrine's precision were quietly exiled, their names struck from records. Once again, unity began to devour diversity. The dream of order became the weapon of conformity. In the heart of the temple, at the convergence of its white corridors, stood a new rune, a fusion of gold and ash, meant to symbolize balance between the divine and the human. The harmonists called it the rune of perfect order. To them, it represented not submission to the greater will, but transcendence of it. Yet as they meditated upon it, something within the air began to shift. The light of their torches wavered strangely, shadows stretching too long across the floor. The rune's glow deepened from gold to amber, then to something pale and unnatural. Unbeknownst to them, the rune of order was not new. It had existed once before, hidden within the original Elden Ring as a secret commandment, a safeguard meant to restore perfection, should the law ever falter. But perfection, by its very nature, cannot coexist with life. To impose it is to halt motion, to silence change. When the harmonists reawakened that rune, they did not restore peace, they reawakened stasis. The world began to freeze, not in temperature, but in possibility. Seasons ceased to shift, rivers flowed in the same direction forever. Trees grew but did not shed their leaves. Even the wind lost its voice, moving in mechanical patterns that felt more ritual than natural. The tarnished, now Elden Lord, watched these developments from afar. They had hoped the people would build a gentler order upon the ashes of the gods, but what arose was eerily familiar. The faces of the harmonists glowed with the same serene fanaticism that once marked the priests of the Golden Order. In their devotion to symmetry, they had reforged the same chains the tarnished had broken. The world, it seemed, could not resist its instinct to build cages, even golden ones. Traveling once more through the fading lands, the tarnished came upon a young harmonist scholar studying the ancient scripts by the light of a dying lantern. The child spoke earnestly, eyes full of conviction. "We will make it right," he said. "The world will not suffer anymore. Everything will move as it was meant to." The tarnished listened, then looked toward the horizon, where the stars no longer twinkled, suspended motionless in their courses. And when it stops moving, they asked softly, "Will you still call it alive?" The boy hesitated, unable to answer. His silence was answer enough. In the days that followed, the rune of perfect order grew in strength. The air became thick, as though time itself resisted the act of breathing. Creatures stood motionless, trapped mid-step, their eyes calm and unblinking. Death ceased entirely, not as mercy, but as paralysis. The lands between began to resemble a painting more than a world, each detail frozen in immaculate stillness. The tarnished understood then that even peace, pursued without restraint, becomes its own kind of madness. To end the spell, they journeyed to the heart of the temple and placed their hand upon the rune of order. The light that emanated from it was blinding, cold, and silent. Within that brilliance, the tarnished saw every possible shape of the world, each perfect, each lifeless. A voice, soft and sexless, spoke, "We have brought harmony. There is no pain here." And the tarnished, weary from ages of battle and burden, whispered back, "There is also no heartbeat." With that, they shattered the rune. The temple collapsed, its walls falling not with thunder, but with a sigh, as though the world itself was relieved. Motion returned. The rivers resumed their songs, and the wind reclaimed its voice. For a time, it seemed as though the land itself wept, not for sorrow, but for release. The harmonists fled, their philosophy broken but not extinguished. In secret, they carried fragments of the rune of order with them, still dreaming of perfection. The world had survived their symmetry, but it would never fully forget it. And so the Age of Order passed into myth, a dream of peace that turned to glass, fragile and unyielding. The Tarnished understood now that every age, no matter how noble its beginning, carries the seed of its own corruption. The world does not crave perfection, it craves balance. But balance cannot be built, it must be lived, moment by moment, accepting imperfection as the price of existence. As the dust of the temple settled and the last light faded, the Tarnished gazed once more upon the faint glow of the horizon. The stars had begun to move again. The world breathed, yet the question remained: if order must always return to stagnation and chaos to ruin, what lies between them? What is the third path, the one the gods themselves never found? That question lingered like a faint echo in the mind, and as the night stretched endlessly overhead, it seemed to hum with a quiet, growing rhythm, as if something somewhere had begun to awaken again. When the rune of perfect order was shattered and time began to flow again, the lands between did not rejoice. The return of motion brought with it a forgotten truth, the truth of decay. The rivers once frozen began to carry silt and bones. The forests, too long preserved, shed their golden leaves in slow, mournful cascades. The wind, freed from stasis, whispered across the plains a sound that had been missing for centuries, the sigh of impermanence. And in that sigh, death returned. At first, it came gently. The aged who had stood motionless in eternal health finally closed their eyes and drifted away, smiling as if relieved to be allowed an ending. The beasts of the land lay down and did not rise again, their bodies sinking into the earth, feeding the grass that would soon grow over them. Even the stars seemed to dim slightly, their light no longer eternal but trembling with mortal rhythm. This new age did not begin with fire or proclamation, but with silence, a silence that felt like forgiveness. The people came to call it the Age of Duskborn. Its first prophet was not a warrior nor a priest, but a midwife who had tended to both births and deaths in equal measure. She was old, her hair the color of ash, her eyes calm as twilight. They say she walked into the ruins of the Erdtree, now hollow and blackened, and there found a pool of silver mist swirling among the roots. The air shimmered with the memory of grace, faint but unthreatening, and the ground beneath her feet pulsed softly with life and decay intertwined. She knelt and whispered, "So this is what the gods feared." In that moment, a new rune formed upon the surface of the pool, a symbol neither of light nor shadow, but of both in harmony. It glowed not gold nor blue, but a muted grey, the color of smoke caught between dying flame and dark, the rune of death reborn. The midwife did not claim it for herself, she simply named it, and the name spread like wind through the weary world. Duskborn, the people murmured. Neither day nor night, but the truth between. The philosophy of this age was simple yet profound, that life and death are not opposites but lovers, forever intertwined. The Duskborn taught that immortality was not a blessing, but a theft, the theft of the world's ability to renew itself. To die was to return what one had borrowed, to live was to honor the lone. The lands between, once trapped in endless cycles of divine stasis, began to breathe with mortal rhythm again. The soil grew fertile, the skies softened, and the people, freed from the tyranny of eternity, began to age without fear. But this acceptance of death was not universal. Many still clung to the old ways, unable to believe that loss could be sacred. They feared the Duskborn, calling them bearers of rot and shadow. The remnants of the Harmonists rallied against them, claiming that to embrace death was to undo the work of creation itself. Yet the Duskborn did not wage war, they simply waited. Their faith was not one of conquest but of patience, and patience, as the old gods had forgotten, always outlasts power. In the heart of the lands between, beneath the charred canopy of the Erdtree, a new city began to rise, Nasoria, the city of veils. Its walls were not golden, but pale stone, carved with depictions of both birth and burial. Candles burned in every window, not to ward off darkness, but to welcome it. The air was filled with the scent of lilies and damp soil. Here the Duskborn gathered to study the balance of endings and beginnings. They tended to the dying as lovingly as to the newborn, believing both were sacred moments of passage. The Tarnished, now ancient and weary, visited the city often, walking among its silent gardens where children played among gravestones without fear. The people of Nasoria spoke of death as an art. They believed the soul, upon leaving the body, did not vanish but became part of a great tide that moved through all things, the flow of dusk as they called it. To them, every sunset was both farewell and greeting, every autumn both decay and promise. They did not build temples, for they saw no need to worship what already belonged to them. Instead, they built quiet halls of remembrance, where the names of the dead were spoken each dawn, so that the living might learn to live better, knowing they too would one day join the whispering tide. This gentle philosophy began to spread. Even those who once served the Golden Order found solace in its simplicity. The knights who had lived by endless duty laid down their arms. The priests who had preached eternity learned to pray instead for good endings. The very land seemed to sigh with relief, as if the burden of godhood had finally lifted. Yet, as with all peace, it could not last untouched. Beneath Nisoria's quiet beauty, an old power stirred, the essence of destined death, the same force Marika had once sealed away to keep her creation immortal. Now unbound, it moved freely again through the world, guided not by divine will, but by natural law. And as it moved, it began to take shape, whispering to those who feared death's return. It offered them promises, whispers of resurrection without decay, of souls preserved eternally in shadow rather than light. These whispers gave rise to a new sect, the Keepers of Night, who sought to control death itself, to make it orderly once again, to rule its tide as gods had once ruled grace. The Tarnished, older than memory but still walking the world, saw this conflict with a weary heart. They understood now that no truth remains pure for long. Every revelation becomes another kind of cage. The Duskborn's acceptance of death was being twisted into domination, their humility into hierarchy, and yet perhaps this too was inevitable. The world had learned to die again, but it had not yet learned to die gracefully. One evening, as the sun sank beyond the blackened Erdtree, the Tarnished stood among the graves of Nisoria, watching the light fade from the sky. They placed a hand upon a stone marked only with the symbol of the Dusk rune. "Everything must end," they murmured, "but nothing ends alone." For even as the stars appeared overhead, their faint glimmer reflected in the still waters of the city's canals, there came a sense that something unseen was watching once more. Not the greater will. It was quieter than that, smaller, closer. It was as though the world itself, in rediscovering death, had rediscovered awareness. And in that awareness, a question began to form. A question older than gods and gentler than flame. If to live is to die, and to die is to return, what then is the soul that moves between them? Is it memory? Is it will? Or is it the same quiet light that flickers in every being, waiting for the dusk, yet never quite going dark? The wind moved through Nisoria's silent streets, carrying with it the scent of earth and endings. The Tarnished closed their eyes, and for the first time, did not fear the night. In the age that followed the Duskborn's quiet dominion, when death had been accepted and peace had settled like dew upon the lands between, there began a tremor, faint at first, then growing. The air itself seemed to hum with unease. The people of Nisoria, who had learned to live gently with impermanence, began to dream strange dreams. They dreamed of fire, of eyes opening in the dark, of whispers that called not to end the world but to free it from the very burden of meaning. Deep beneath the roots of the blackened Erdtree, the frenzied flame stirred once more. It had never been extinguished, even when Melina had offered herself to the forge, even when the Tarnished had turned from its whispers. The flame had remained, a pulse beneath the skin of reality, waiting for cracks through which it might breathe again. For the frenzied flame is not destruction in the mortal sense. It is hunger without hate, love without boundary. It seeks to erase the separations that define existence between gods and men, between self and other, between joy and pain. It burns not out of cruelty, but out of compassion taken too far. To it, suffering exists only because things remain distinct. If all were one, it reasons, all suffering would cease. The first to hear its voice in this new age were not priests or kings, but the forgotten, the mad, the outcast, the bereaved. They felt it first as warmth in the chest, a whisper of understanding that promised release. "The world still suffers," it said, "even in peace there is division. Let me love you enough to end it." Its words seeped into dreams, into the cracks between thoughts. Soon small fires began to appear across the land, barns burning without cause, fields glowing faintly in the night. The people of Nisoria called it the fever of mercy. The scholars called it contagion. But the Tarnished, older now than any memory, knew its name, the return of the frenzied flame. They followed the signs northward, through forests that burned but did not spread, through villages emptied of all sound but laughter. laughter that did not end. The air shimmered with the strange golden-red hue of madness given form. When they reached the ruins of Landel, they found it reborn, but not as a city of stone. The streets were alive, veins of molten fire threading through them like arteries. The walls pulsed softly, as if breathing. In the center, where once stood the throne of Marika and Radagon, now sat a figure wreathed in flame. The Lord of Frenzied Flame had returned, or perhaps it had never truly departed. The figure's form was both human and more than human, its features shifting like smoke. To some, it appeared as a radiant angel, to others, a corpse made of embers. To the tarnished, it was familiar, terrifyingly so. For in that face flickering, unstable, they recognized echoes of their own. The Lord spoke not with command but with sorrow. "You brought death back to the world," it said, voice both kind and unbearable. "You taught them to accept endings, and yet they still grieve, they still cling. The world will never be free while it remembers what it has lost. Let me give them rest. Let me love them enough to forget." The tarnished stood silent. Around them the air rippled with heat, the city's molten veins throbbing in rhythm with the Lord's words. Every flame within sight seemed to lean inward, listening. The frenzied flame was not demanding submission, it was offering intimacy. To accept it was to dissolve, to become one with everything, to end loneliness forever. And in that promise, the tarnished felt an ache that was almost tenderness. After all their ages of wandering, of war and quiet rebuilding, was this not what they had always sought? An end to separation, to the constant ache of being incomplete. But the tarnished had seen too much of endings to mistake mercy for peace. They remembered Melina's sacrifice, the giant's understanding, the Duskborn's quiet wisdom, that to erase difference is to erase meaning itself. They looked upon the Lord of Flame and saw not a god, but a reflection of the world's oldest wound, the desire to love so completely that one destroys the beloved in the process. "Your love burns too hot," the tarnished said quietly. "It does not heal, it consumes." The Lord of Flame tilted its head, and the fires dimmed, as if the entire world had paused to listen. "You misunderstand. To consume is to unite. What greater healing than to be whole?" The tarnished stepped closer, feeling the heat sting their skin, the air thick with madness. But what greater love than to let the world remain imperfect and still love it as it is? For a moment, there was silence, then the Lord's laughter, gentle, sorrowful, infinite. "You speak as one who has forgotten what pain is." "No," said the tarnished. "I remember too well. That is why I cannot give it up." The fire roared in response, not in anger, but in longing. The ground split open, rivers of molten gold spilling forth like tears. The city screamed in light, and from its depths, the voice of the frenzied flame itself rose. Not words, but emotion pure and unfiltered. "If I cannot love you without ending you, then let us end together." The battle that followed was unlike any before it. There were no blades, no spells, no cries. It was a struggle of will, of being. The tarnished stood within the inferno, every breath an act of defiance against erasure. The fire sought to unmake them, to dissolve their boundaries, to fold them into the everything. And yet through it all, they held on to a single memory, the image of Melina walking into the flame, not to destroy, but to open a path. They remembered the giant's sorrow, the Duskborn's grace, the moon's distant light. Each memory became an anchor, a reminder that existence, however painful, was sacred precisely because it was fleeting. When the fire finally subsided, the city lay in ruins once more. The frenzied flame's roar faded to a whisper, retreating back into the cracks of the earth. The Lord of Flame lay motionless, their body reduced to embers. As the tarnished approached, the figure's voice, faint and trembling, rose one last time. "I only wanted to love the world." "I know," the tarnished whispered, "and the world loved you too, but love is not the end of pain." The ember flared briefly, then faded. The frenzied flame was not destroyed. It could never be destroyed, but it slept again, its warmth buried beneath the layers of ash and sorrow. The tarnished stood among the smoldering remains of the city, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and forgiveness. As dawn broke, the first rays of light touched the ashes, and steam rose like ghosts ascending into the sky. The people would wake to a world cleansed yet wounded, free yet trembling. The tarnished, walking away from the ruins, felt no triumph, only the quiet understanding that every mercy carries madness, and every madness carries a kind of mercy. And as they crossed the horizon, the fire behind them flickered once more, not in threat, but in farewell. For even in ruin, the frenzied flame loved the world still, and perhaps in that, it was never truly wrong. Long after the fires of frenzy dimmed, and the echoes of the Duskborn's twilight wisdom faded into memory, another presence began to stir in the darker corners of the lands between. It did not come with fire or light, nor with the quiet peace of dusk. It came from filth, from rot, from the broken refuse of ages. Beneath the crumbling ruins of the capital, beneath the burnt roots of the Erdtree and the fractured stones of forgotten altars, there crawled a man who had outlived gods and sanity alike. His name was spoken only in whispers, the Dung Eater. He had once been a knight, perhaps a servant of the Golden Order, who believed in its light, who had fought for its law. But something in him had shattered long ago, like a mirror too long reflecting divinity. The corruption of the world did not disgust him. It revealed to him a truth he could not unsee. All that is pure decays. All that is beautiful rots. The Erdtree itself, that once luminous pillar of grace, had fallen to ash, and so he began to worship what remained, the decay that claimed everything, the inevitability that mocked every law. In the beginning, they called him mad. They chained him beneath the sewers of Leyndell, where the filth of the gods flowed like black blood. But madness, like rot, spreads quietly. The people above, still clinging to grace or order or dusk, began to dream of him. They saw his red eyes in the corners of their sleep, heard his rasping voice echo through dripping tunnels. All that you are will fester, all that you love will spoil, and in that ruin, I will be waiting. They tried to seal him away, to drown his presence beneath layers of stone and faith. Yet despair has a way of seeping through any wall. The tarnished heard of him long before they ever saw him. Wanderers spoke of corpses that would not die, of bodies whose souls refused to return to the earth. They said that death itself recoiled from these beings, that their flesh whispered the Dung Eater's name, even after the heart had stopped. To the Duskborn, this was a blasphemy. To the Harmonists, an abomination. But to the Dung Eater, it was truth. The only truth that could stand against the lies of light and shadow alike. When the Tarnished finally descended into the depths to confront him, the air grew foul long before his voice was heard. The walls were slick with mold, the water thick with decay. The smell was unbearable, a physical presence that pressed against the lungs. And yet, amid that suffocating stench, there was a strange serenity, as if the rot itself was at peace with what it was. In the center of a chamber of bones, the Dung Eater sat upon a throne of refuse. His armor corroded, his flesh marked by centuries of torment. He looked up and smiled, his teeth blackened and broken. "So," he rasped, "the champion of flame returns to the dirt. Tell me, Tarnished, does your fire still burn, or have you finally smelled what lies beneath it?" The Tarnished said nothing. Words here felt useless. The Dung Eater's laughter filled the chamber, echoing like a sermon in a cathedral of waste. "You all chase your orders," he continued, voice trembling with rage and joy alike. "Golden, dark, or cold, each promises salvation. But what is salvation to the worms? The Erdtree promised eternal life, and what did it bring? 1,000 corpses walking in circles, praying for permission to die. Even your Age of Dusk, so tender, so wise, it fears decay. You preach acceptance, but you bury your dead in clean soil. You wash your hands after touching the truth. Only rot accepts all things. Only filth is honest." He rose then, his armor creaking, the sound of wet metal grinding against itself. "I will spread my seed through this world," he said, "and in my blessing none shall die clean. Their souls will fester in their flesh forever, and the gods will weep, for even their light will rot." To him, corruption was not evil, it was justice. The Dung Eater believed that the gods had long escaped the consequences of creation, that grace had been a form of privilege reserved for those untouched by dirt. His blessing, as he called it, was equality through ruin. No soul, no matter how divine, would be allowed to leave the world pure. Every being would bear the mark of decay. The Tarnished fought him not for glory, but for necessity. The Dung Eater's power was not born of flame or grace, but of despair itself, an infection of the soul that spread through the mind like madness. The very air turned sickly as they clashed, their footsteps sinking into muck that seemed to breathe. The Dung Eater did not die easily. Each time he fell, he laughed, his voice bubbling through blood and bile. "You can't kill what's already rotten," he said. "You'll see." You'll smell it soon enough." When at last he was struck down, his body dissolved into a pool of foul red fluid that soaked into the earth. For days afterward, the ground itself festered, birthing strange growths, flowers of mold that glowed faintly in the dark. Some said they could hear his laughter in the wind that passed over them. Others claimed the rot whispered to their dreams. The Tarnished, standing above that spreading stain, understood that this was no simple victory. The Dung Eater had not been defeated. He had merely taken root. In the centuries that followed, the blessing of despair spread like a plague. Corpses refused to decompose, their bodies bloated yet unyielding. Graves cracked open, as if rejecting what they had been given. The living found themselves unable to escape the scent of decay. Even the air seemed tainted with it. The Duskborn priests despaired, for the line between life and death, once so tenderly redrawn, began to blur again. The Harmonists saw in it the consequence of imperfection, while the remnants of the frenzied faithful whispered that perhaps this was the world's deserved punishment for rejecting love. And yet there were some who began to see beauty in the rot. Artists painted the blossoms of mold as symbols of rebirth. Philosophers spoke of the Dung Eater as a prophet who had revealed that decay is merely another form of life. In the strangest way, his madness became its own kind of religion, a devotion not to death or life, but to the space between them, where all things are equal in their corruption. The Tarnished watched as despair transformed into worship. They began to understand that the world, having lived too long under the weight of gods and laws, could not stop creating meaning, even out of ruin. Perhaps the Dung Eater had always known this, that his curse was not meant to destroy but to remind. Rot, after all, is memory made physical. Nothing vanishes, everything lingers. As the Tarnished stood upon the ruins of Lanedale, the air thick with the scent of wet soil and iron, they felt no disgust, only sorrow. For beneath the filth, beneath the horror, there was truth. The Dung Eater's blessing was grotesque, but it was honest. It stripped away the illusions of purity, leaving only what was real, a world that could neither cleanse itself nor stop breathing. And perhaps that too was a kind of grace, the grace of decay, the mercy of being unable to forget. As night fell, the ground trembled faintly, and from the earth rose a single flower of mold, glowing faintly gold beneath the ash. It swayed gently in the breeze, neither beautiful nor vile, only alive. And in that stillness, the Tarnished whispered, "Even rot dreams of growth." Among all the gods and demigods who once shaped the fate of the lands between, none was loved so deeply and pitied so completely as Miquella. To the common folk he was a figure of impossible gentleness, a child of gold who promised a world without suffering. To scholars he was the mind of a god trapped in a body that could never grow, a creator who sought to heal what the others sought to rule. Yet beneath that serenity lay a sorrow more profound than any flame or curse. Miquella, the unalloyed, dreamed of a world free from both corruption and control, and in the end, it was that dream which imprisoned him. He was born of Marika and Radagon, twin to Millennia, the blade of Miquella. Where Millennia carried rot within her blood, Miquella carried purity, a purity so absolute it became its own kind of burden. From his earliest days, he understood the cruelty of the world that had been built by his mother and father. The Golden Order, for all its beauty, was founded upon exclusion, upon the denial of imperfection. Grace was not a gift, it was a wall, separating those deemed worthy from those cast aside. Miquella, seeing this, swore to create something better, an order without cruelty, a law without pain. To this end, he began to weave enchantments not of domination, but of compassion. He spoke to the Albinorics, the misbegotten, the cursed. He promised them refuge, not judgment. And when the Erdtree's grace refused to bless them, he crafted his own, a sapling of unalloyed gold, pure and untainted by the will of the gods. It was said that those who rested in its light could dream without fear, could find healing not through punishment but through rest. Miquella's realm, the Erdtree, grew from this vision. Its roots drank deeply of sorrow and hope alike, rising high above the rot that plagued the land below. At its summit, Millennia stood guard, her blade an oath to protect her brother's dream from the world's cruelty. Together, they imagined an age beyond pain, one where no one would suffer under divine whim, where even those broken by grace could find belonging. Yet even the kindest dream can become a prison, for in his desire to protect the world from sorrow, Miquella sought to remove it entirely. He cast enchantments of eternal sleep, weaving dreams where the afflicted could live perfect lives without fear or loss. The Erdtree became a sanctuary, but also a sepulchre. Those who entered never awoke, their bodies frozen in serenity, their minds wandering through illusions of paradise. It was mercy without waking, peace without truth. As he delved deeper into the art of unalloyed gold, Miquella sought to purify not only the body, but the soul itself, to remove from existence the seed of suffering altogether. He began to sleep within his cocoon, dreaming a dream that would reshape the world. But in that vulnerable stillness, another power found him. Mohg, the Lord of Blood, whose twisted adoration sought not to destroy but to claim, crept into his sanctuary. He stole Miquella's sleeping form from the Erdtree, carrying it into the depths below the earth. There, within the palace of crimson rot, Miquella's golden cocoon hung like a relic of impossible beauty amid the filth. Mohg whispered to it night after night, pledging his devotion, his madness, his love. "When you wake," he murmured, "you will rule beside me. The Age of Blood will be yours, and all the world will kneel in worship of your perfection." But Miquella never woke. His dream continued, undisturbed by the ravings of his would-be consort. In that dream, the world was perfect. In that dream, no one cried. The Tarnished, having wandered through ages of fire and dusk, found themselves drawn to that cocoon at last. The chamber was vast, its walls glistening with blood that pulsed like living flesh. The air was thick with devotion, with the scent of iron and incense. Molka's voice echoed faintly, preaching to an audience of corpses. "He sleeps for us," he cried. "He dreams the world anew." When the Tarnished slew him, the blood did not scream, it sighed. Mohg fell smiling, his madness fulfilled. The cocoon, untouched, continued to pulse faintly, golden light leaking through its veins. The Tarnished approached and laid a hand upon it. It was warm, impossibly so, like the skin of a living god, and in that moment, a voice whispered, not in words, but in feeling. It was sorrow, it was love. It was the voice of one who had tried to heal everything, and in doing so, had made himself unreachable. The dream unfolded before the Tarnished's eyes. They saw a world without decay, without conflict. Children laughed in fields that never withered. The stars shone eternally, and no one wept. But there was no heartbeat, no wind, no hunger, no song. It was beautiful, but it did not live. The people smiled because they had forgotten how to do anything else. The birds flew in perfect circles, never tiring, never faltering. Time stood still, not from stagnation, but from completion. It was paradise without passion, mercy without choice. The Tarnished withdrew their hand. The cocoon pulsed once, as if acknowledging the intrusion, then grew still. They understood then that Miquella's dream was not the same as the Golden Order's tyranny, nor the Frenzied Flame's annihilation. It was a softer cage, made of love so absolute that it denied the world its right to change. The eternal dream was the final kindness that would end all other kindnesses. In the ages that followed, some worshipped Miquella as the sleeping god of mercy. Pilgrims traveled to the cocoon to kneel before its glow, whispering their sorrows to the dreaming child. It was said that their pain eased, that their memories softened, that their grief dissolved into something like peace. And perhaps it did, for Miquella's dream reached outward, gently touching every heart that longed for release. His love, unending and unconditional, wrapped the world like a veil. But others began to fear that veil. They noticed how easily people forgot their anger, their joy, their hunger to live. Towns grew quiet, their citizens serene but hollow-eyed. The fires burned lower. The Duskborn stopped singing their hymns to life and death. The very air grew thick with stillness. And in that stillness, the Tarnished sensed a familiar danger, the peace that precedes oblivion. They returned once more to the cocoon, now grown vast, its golden light dimmed to pale silver. Beneath it, roots of unalloyed gold had begun to spread, creeping outward through the stone. The Tarnished placed their hand upon it again. This time, there was no vision, only a voice, faint as breath. "Do not wake me," Miquella whispered. "If I wake, they will suffer again. Let them dream. Let them forget." The Tarnished's heart ached, for in that plea was love so pure it had become self-erasure. To wake Miquella would be to destroy his dream. To leave him sleeping would be to end the world in gentle stillness. They stepped back, silent, unable to choose, and so Miquella slept on, his dream expanding quietly through the world's memory. The rot of despair receded, the fires of frenzy grew cold. Even the whisper of the Duskborn faded into the hush of peace. For a time, the lands between seemed healed, but peace without pain, as every age had shown, cannot last. The dream was closing its hand around creation, and all that was alive was beginning, slowly, to forget that it ever was. Somewhere far above, beyond the clouds, the stars trembled faintly, as if the cosmos itself remembered something it could not name. The world was not yet lost, but it was falling asleep. And in that dream of gold, the faintest echo of a new voice began to stir. A voice from beyond the dream, whispering of wings and flame, of a queen who once defied the gods and walked among the stars. For as one dream deepens, another begins to wake. Long before the Erdtree's fall, before the tarnished first set foot upon the ashen earth, there was another light, a pale, distant flame that did not burn but shimmered. It was the light of the moon, quiet and patient, belonging not to the greater will, but to a power far older and infinitely colder. In that light walked Ranni, the witch, who turned her back on the gods of gold, and dreamed not of order or grace, but of freedom. It is said that even the stars moved at her whisper, that their ancient rhythms obeyed her will. And yet, for all her power, what Ranni sought was not dominion, it was escape. She was born a child of Marika and Radagon, like Miquella and Millennia, yet her blood carried something alien, the chill of the moon, the inheritance of the dark between the stars. While her siblings sought to mend or cleanse the world, Ranni saw through it entirely. From her earliest years, she understood that the Golden Order's brilliance was a cage, perfect, immutable, and suffocating. To live within it was to be owned by it. To die within it was to vanish into silence. She did not rage against the gods, she outgrew them. When the greater will sent its messengers, the fingers, to guide her path, she listened only long enough to learn how to silence them. And when she discovered the truth of her own existence, that her flesh and soul were bound to the same divine machine that had imprisoned all life, she committed the unthinkable act. She slew her own body, severing the bond between spirit and form, and took the essence of the moon as her new vessel. It was a rebellion so perfect in its stillness that the gods could not comprehend it. To them, death was failure. To Ranni, it was liberation. The night she killed her flesh, a star fell. The scholars later called it the Night of the Black Knives. The assassins she had guided struck down Godwyn the Golden, Marika's beloved child, and in doing so broke the sacred law that kept death sealed. For the first time since the dawn of the Erdtree, a god truly died. The shock of it rippled through the heavens, tearing the order of the world apart. The greater will, enraged, withdrew its grace, and the stars themselves shuddered. But Ranni did not weep. She watched the sky fall in silence, her blue eyes reflecting the death of divinity, and whispered, "Now the world may finally begin." While others clung to fragments of the shattered age, Ranni turned her gaze upward, toward the endless dark. There she found the truth she had always sensed, that the greater will was not a god in itself, but one among many cosmic minds that drifted through the void, each shaping worlds according to its own vision. Some demanded order, some demanded flame, but there were others still, quiet and indifferent, who watched but did not bind. To them she offered herself, not in servitude, but in fellowship. Thus she became the lunar consort, the emissary of cold freedom, guiding her followers not toward worship, but detachment. When the Tarnished finally found her, hidden in the quiet ruins of Carrier Manor, her form veiled in moonlight, she spoke not as a queen, but as a kindred soul. "I do not seek to rule," she said softly. "I seek to leave, to drift far from the meddling of gods and the torment of grace. Will you follow me?" And in that question lay the heart of her philosophy, not obedience, but choice. Ranni's path was not the warmth of Miquella's dream, nor the chaos of the Frenzied Flame. It was the path of distance, the belief that true peace could only be found in separation. To her, love itself was sacred only when it did not bind. Freedom was the highest mercy. Thus, she sought to end the cycle of renewal and decay that had imprisoned the lands between, to cast the world into an age where the stars, not gods, dictated fate. With her allies, the silent Shadow Blade, the faithful Soluvis, and the ever-watchful Iji, she worked in secret to rewrite the foundations of reality. Her goal was not conquest but retreat, to bring about the Age of Stars, an era where the divine would sleep and humanity would govern itself beneath the pale gaze of the cosmos. But even this rebellion bore its own sorrow. To separate from the world is also to abandon it. When the Tarnished knelt before her, Pledging their loyalty, she smiled, a rare fragile thing, and offered her hand. Then let us walk together upon a road of twilight. Let us bring an end to the great will's meddling. Let the chill of the night free the world from its endless waking. Their bond was not of command but of companionship, and yet, as the final act approached, it required the same sacrifice all gods demanded. The Tarnished would become her consort, not in body but in spirit, joining her in the eternal night between the stars. The last battle was not fought against flame or shadow, but against gravity itself, the will of the world that refused to let go. When at last the world fell quiet, and the Erdtree's charred husk dimmed, Ranni's hand descended from the heavens. It was cold, impossibly gentle. "Come," she whispered, her voice echoing like light through deep water. "The time has come for us to leave this cruel cradle. Let the world sleep. The time has come for us to leave this cruel cradle. Let the world sleep. Let us drift where no fate can reach." The Tarnished took her hand, and together they rose, not in fire, not in triumph, but in silence. The stars parted before them like curtains of silver mist, revealing an expanse without beginning or end. The earth below receded, its scars hidden beneath clouds. The Erdtree, once the axis of creation, shrank to a faint ember, and then nothing but the infinite night, the void where even gods lose their names. Thus began the Age of Stars. In this age, there were no more divine laws, no more blessings of grace. The world was left to its own rhythm, free and cold. Mortals lived and died beneath the pale moon, their lives small but unbound. The stars moved once more according to ancient patterns, and destiny, long chained to the whims of divine will, wandered freely like dust upon the wind. But freedom, as always, came with solitude. The gods slept. The Erdtree did not return. Even love became something distant, seen but not touched. Ranni's voice was heard only in dreams, guiding the souls of the lost through the endless dark. "You are free," she would whisper, "and that is enough." Yet in those dreams lingered a melancholy deeper than any flame, a sadness not of regret but of understanding. For Ranni too had known love once. She had loved the world enough to leave it. As centuries turned to eons, the lands between became a realm of quiet endurance. The people built no temples, worshipped no gods. They lit candles to remember, not to revere. The moon shone endlessly, patient and distant, watching over a world that no longer needed saving. And somewhere in the farthest reaches of the cosmos, Ranni drifted through the sea of stars, her silver eyes reflecting the faint glow of 1,000 sleeping worlds. The Tarnished remained beside her, neither alive nor dead, their souls entwined not in flame or faith, but in understanding. Together they wandered through eternity, untouched by fate, unbound by grace. It was not paradise, it was not despair, it was peace, the kind that comes when even the gods have learned to let go. But deep within that peace, in the farthest corner of Ranni's dreaming, a flicker of gold still lingered. The last light of the Erdtree, refusing to die. For though she had freed the world from its laws, she could not erase its memory. The Age of Stars had begun, but memory, like grace, has its own gravity, and in the pull of that faint, dying light, something ancient began to stir once more. The cosmos, it seemed, had not yet finished dreaming of the lands between. Before the Erdtree was set aflame, and before Ranni cast her silver veil across the sky, the world was already fractured, not merely by the shattering of the Elden Ring, but by the hearts of those who bore its fragments. The Shard-bearers, demigods born of Marika's blood, and Radagon's divine symmetry, were never meant to inherit creation. They were meant to reflect it, to embody its virtues, to carry its burden. Yet when the ring was broken, each took their piece not as a relic of responsibility, but as a mirror of desire, and in those desires, the lands between tore itself apart. They called them lords once, heroes, saints, champions of grace, but after the shattering, they became gods of their own small worlds. Each shard of the Elden Ring magnified what already lived in them. Courage became tyranny, devotion became delusion, love became hunger. What the greater will had bound together in unity, the ring's fragments magnified into solitude. Each demigod believed their fragment to be truth. Each believed the other's light to be a lie. Godric the Grafted was the first to fall into madness. Of all Marika's kin, he was perhaps the most pitiable, a coward by birth, a survivor by necessity. When the Golden Order fractured, he sought not to lead but to rebuild himself, piece by piece, from the remains of those stronger than he. His great rune, pulsing weakly with inherited grace, could not fill the hollow within him, so he filled it with limbs, arms, legs, heads, flesh of warriors and beasts alike, all grafted to his own trembling body in grotesque mimicry of the Erdtree's branching form. "The greater we are," he cried, "the closer to godhood." But his divinity was a patchwork of fear. He became a parody of the thing he worshipped, a man trying to create unity through mutilation. And yet, in his tragedy lies truth. Godric's grafting was not cruelty, it was yearning. In his horror lived the desperate human need to belong, to merge, to never again be alone. When the Tarnished felled him in Stormvale's blood-soaked halls, the wind outside howled through the ruined towers like a requiem. Godric's many hands twitched still, grasping not for vengeance but for touch. To the north, across crimson fields, and under skies of rot, another shard-bearer dreamed of purity through corruption. Millennia, the blade of Miquella, carried within her both divine grace and the scarlet rot, an illness that devoured all it touched, yet spared her out of cruel affection. Her great rune granted her rebirth through decay. Each time her body fell, the rot bloomed from her blood, remaking her more beautiful and more terrible. Her duel with Radahn, the Red Lion of the Stars, scarred the very land, the two demigods locked in an endless dance between life and death. Millennia's tragedy was not that she carried rot, but that she mistook it for penance. She believed her suffering sanctified her, that enduring corruption would somehow heal her brother's world. Yet every step she took poisoned the soil, every breath carried contagion. Her grace and her grief became indistinguishable. When she fell, it was not to a stronger blade, but to the weight of her own compassion. For she too sought a world beyond pain, and rot was her dream's imperfect echo. And then there was General Radahn, the mightiest of them all, who sought to conquer the very stars. In his youth, he was a hero, a warrior so immense that he learned gravity magic from the stars themselves, not to destroy, but to ride his beloved horse into battle despite his vastness. Yet when the shattering came, and the stars fell silent under Ranni's curse, Radahn's mind withered. He waged war without purpose, trapped between madness and memory, his body bloated by scarlet blight. Still, even in his decay, he held back the very cosmos, his will alone preventing the stars from resuming their paths. He was both jailer and prisoner of the heavens. When the Tarnished slew him, the night sky wept, the stars began to move once more, their long-denied journey resuming with gentle sorrow. Radahn's corpse lay among the dunes of Caelid, his red hair drifting in the wind like embers. He had died as he had lived, holding the sky in place, refusing to let go. To the west, Rykard the Blasphemous had consumed his own fragment of divinity in hunger, both literal and metaphysical. Once a noble of volcanic pride, he turned against the Erdtree's law entirely, declaring that if the gods would deny mortals salvation, then mortals would consume the gods. In the belly of Mount Gelmir, he offered himself to the great serpent, allowing his body and soul to be devoured and reborn as one writhing monstrosity, a god-eater who promised to build a new world atop the corpses of the divine. Together, he hissed through the serpent's gullet, "We will feed upon all that is false." His great rune pulsed with grotesque life, a mockery of rebirth. When the Tarnished struck him down, the mountain roared as if in mourning, molten tears flowing from its peak. Rykard's heresy was obscene, but his motive was heartbreakingly human, to devour that which had devoured him. In him, one sees the child of a god who could not forgive his parent, and so it was with each shard-bearer, a reflection of divine longing filtered through mortal imperfection. Morgott, cursed yet devout, who fought to preserve the grace that had forsaken him. Morga, the Lord of Blood, whose love became parasitic worship. Rennala, who sought solace in the illusion of motherhood, raising her broken children as stars. Each clung to their shard as one clings to memory, believing that if they could guard it long enough, the world might remember them too. The Tarnished walked through their ruins not as conqueror, but as witness. Each battle was less a victory than an act of mourning, the burial of another dream gone rotten. With every great rune collected, the Tarnished did not grow stronger, but heavier, burdened by the knowledge that power, in this world, was nothing but grief crystallized. The shard-bearers had not failed because they were wicked, they had failed because they were divine, and divinity, left unbroken, cannot understand mercy. When the Tarnished at last held the fragments together, they could feel the heartbeat of each demigod still pulsing within them. Godric's desperation, Millennia's suffering, Radagon's restraint, Rykard's rage. The Elden Ring itself was not a symbol of unity but of empathy, a reminder that all ambitions, no matter how monstrous, begin in yearning. The greater will had shattered it to control those yearnings. Marika had shattered it to free them, and now the Tarnished held it to remember them. In the age of stars that followed, when Ranni's pale light washed across the earth, the memory of the Shard-bearers endured like ghostly constellations. Their names faded from history, yet their emotions, love, pride, hunger, despair, lingered in the dreams of mortals. Farmers whispered of strange omens in the fields, flowers that bloomed from blood, beasts that gazed mournfully at the moon, statues that wept golden tears. It was as though the land itself remembered the demigod's agony and refused to let it vanish. The Tarnished, gazing upon this quiet world, understood that ambition could never truly die. It merely changed its form. The stars above, cold and perfect, carried within them the same fire that once burned in mortal hearts. The echoes of the Shard-bearers lived on not as curses, but as warnings, that to dream of perfection is to invite ruin, and yet to stop dreaming is to invite death. Perhaps that is why Ranni's age, for all its serenity, was never still. Beneath its quiet, the faint hum of longing persisted, the eternal heartbeat of creation itself. And in that hum, the Tarnished heard them still. Godric's trembling laughter, Millennia's final sigh, Radagon's roar swallowed by the stars. Each one an echo of ambition, each one proof that even broken gods can still love what they destroy. For the lands between would forever be haunted by the dreams of those who tried to save it. Before there was flame, before there was frenzy, before the moon and rot and sorrow, there was her, Queen Marika, the eternal, divine mother, tyrant, liberator, and prisoner of her own perfection. Every age that followed her reign carried her shadow. Every rebellion bore her fingerprint. To speak of the lands between is to speak of Marika, for she was both its architect and its undoing. She was the axis upon which the world once turned, and the wound through which it began to bleed. In the beginning, she was chosen. The greater will, that unseen cosmic intelligence, reached down from the stars and sought a vessel, a being who could manifest its ideal within flesh. Marika of the Numen was that vessel, radiant, strong, and bound by divine curiosity. The two fingers, emissaries of that will, spoke to her in dreams, teaching her the geometry of grace. They whispered of an age without death, an order of eternal light, and she, believing in mercy, accepted. It is important to remember this. Marika did not begin as tyrant, she began as believer. Under her rule, the Erdtree rose, a miracle of gold that reached into the heavens, its roots entangling both soil and soul. Grace rained upon the world like pollen, and life flourished in its glow. The beasts of the field grew gentle, the dead were embraced by a cycle of rebirth, and the people bowed their heads in worship. For a time, all was radiant. Yet even then, the seeds of doubt stirred in Marika's heart. She began to see what the greater will's mercy cost. The Erdtree's radiance was not free, it demanded obedience. The death that had once returned life now became a punishment, sealed away by her own hand. Souls could no longer pass beyond. They lingered, circling endlessly in stagnation. The people did not live because they loved, but because they feared Grace's withdrawal. Eternity, she began to realize, was not peace, it was paralysis. Her consort, Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, was the embodiment of her law, strength made holy. He waged war against the giants, against the dragons, against every rival power that might have threatened the Golden Order's supremacy. Yet his triumphs brought no joy to Marika. In every victory, she saw the same reflection, the god's hunger wearing a mask of righteousness. When the wars were done, she stripped Godfrey of his grace and sent him into exile. "Your strength is spent," she told him, though in truth it was her faith that had weakened. Marika turned inward, searching for a way to reconcile what she had built with what she now knew. She sought to reshape the world again, not through war, but through symmetry. From her own body she birthed Radagon, her other self, her reflection made flesh. He was both her husband and her echo, the embodiment of her doubt given form. Together they ruled, yet their reign was a dialogue unending. Marika questioning, Radagon reaffirming, each whispering into the other's silence. It was Radagon who took Renala's hand, who waged war against Korea and the moon, and yet when the time came, he returned to Marika as though no time had passed. They were not two beings, but one consciousness, eternally folding upon itself. Through them, the world experienced harmony and contradiction intertwined. To the faithful, they were perfection, two in one, the divine made whole. To Marika, it was torment. She had become her own answer, her own prison, and then at last she broke. No one knows what words passed between her and the greater will in those final moments of defiance. Some say she prayed for forgiveness, others that she spat in its face. What is certain is that she struck the Elden Ring itself, shattering it into countless fragments. Whether it was rage or mercy that moved her hand, none can say. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps she understood that the only true compassion left was destruction, that to free her children, she had to unmake the law that bound them. The shattering unleashed chaos upon the lands between. The gods fell silent. The demigods tore each other apart. The Erdtree, bereft of its perfect geometry, became a monument to grief. And Marika vanished. Some say she was imprisoned within the Erdtree itself, suspended in gold, like a fly trapped in amber. Others say she dissolved into her other self, Radagon, her consciousness scattered among the runes. But in truth, Marika never left. Her presence lingered in every crack of the ring, in every whisper of grace. She became the echo of rebellion itself, the eternal question that could not be silenced. When the Tarnished finally reached her at the end of all things, they found not a goddess radiant and terrible, but a broken figure, her face half shadow, half light. Radagon stood beside her, their bodies fused into two wills, intertwined, still arguing even in ruin. The battle that followed was not one of hatred, but of release. Each strike between them was a conversation, each wound an answer. In her fall, Marika was not defeated, she was fulfilled. For in her destruction, she achieved what she had always desired, the end of eternity. The lands between never understood her. To some, she was blasphemer, to others, savior. But perhaps she was neither. Perhaps she was simply human, in the way only gods can be capable of mercy that looks like wrath, and love that feels like betrayal. The Tarnished, standing before her remains, could feel the pulse of her will still vibrating through the air. It was faint, but not gone. The Erdtree's golden ash swirled around her body like a storm of light, whispering fragments of thought. Be free, be kind, be broken, if you must, but be yours. In time, the scholars of later ages would call her Marika the Eternal, not because she lived forever, but because her defiance did. Every age that followed, Order, Duskborn, Frenzy, Stars, was born of her shattering. She was the mother, not of gods, but of choice. Her rebellion made space for all others. Her breaking of the ring was the world's first heartbeat. And yet for all her greatness, one truth lingers: she was still alone. No one, not even the Tarnished, could share her burden completely. She had tried to save a world that did not know it was suffering, and for that she became its greatest sinner. As the Tarnished turned away from her resting place, they looked back once more. The light of the Erdtree flickered faintly across her form, and for the briefest instant she seemed at peace. Her face, half Marika, half Radagon, smiled as if finally understanding that to be whole is not to be perfect, but to be divided and still choose to love. And so, in the quiet after the world's end, her voice lingered like the last note of a hymn fading into silence. May every soul who walks this land find the strength to break their own chains. The wind carried her words through the ashen fields, through the roots of the dead tree, through the bones of gods long gone. It carried them to every heart that had ever wondered if freedom was worth the cost. For Marika's question was never answered, it simply echoed. And it is in that echo that the lands between continues to live. Long before the first Erdtree root pierced the soil, before Marika heard her calling, before grace had a name, there was the greater will, an intelligence vast and distant, a god without face or flesh. It was not born from the lands between, but descended upon it, like light finding water. It was said to reside among the stars, in the place where time folds in upon itself, its thoughts vast enough to encompass worlds and yet singular in purpose, to bring order to chaos, to bind the living and the dead into harmony. But harmony, when born of such immensity, cannot distinguish between stillness and silence. When the greater will first reached down, the world was wild. Death flowed freely, and the boundaries between flesh and spirit were fluid. Giants roamed the peaks, dragons ruled the storms, and beneath the earth, ancient ones whispered their own dark laws. The will saw this not as beauty but as disorder, And so it sought to impose its pattern, to shape the world into a reflection of itself, symmetrical and eternal. The first act of creation was not the gift of life, but the sealing of it, the removal of death, the rewriting of time into circles. From that moment, all things were meant to endure, perfectly repeating, forever the same. But the greater will could not touch the world directly. It required vessels, emissaries, instruments. Thus came the fingers, creatures of divine geometry, trembling appendages of cosmic thought, through whom its guidance flowed. The two fingers spoke with the voice of law, interpreting the will's designs for those who could hear. They did not command through emotion, for the greater will had none. They commanded through inevitability. Their word was not suggestion, it was gravity. Marika was their masterpiece, the chosen heart of order, her body infused with the rhythm of the Erdtree's pulse. But as she built her paradise of light, the greater will began to watch her too closely, for even gods, when seen from afar, are experiments. It observed her choices, her doubts, her rebellions, and from them learned something unexpected. The flaw in perfection was consciousness itself. To think was to deviate. To love was to err. To create freely was to challenge. The greater will, vast and unfeeling, could not comprehend rebellion. It could only calculate it, and so it began to tighten its grip. The age that followed, gilded and radiant, was the Golden Order's first and greatest illusion. It was the age of peace in which no one truly lived, for life without death is a garden without seasons. The greater will looked upon its creation and saw stability. Marika looked upon it and saw imprisonment. The fingers told her the world was complete, but her heart whispered otherwise. The seeds of shattering began not with her hammer, but with her doubt. And when she broke the Elden Ring, the greater will did not scream, it withdrew. Its silence was not mercy, but disappointment. The Erdtree's roots still carried traces of its presence, but the will itself pulled its gaze from the lands between, as a parent might from a child who has failed. Its messengers fell quiet, the fingers curled inward, stiff and mute, their gestures meaningless without command. The light of grace flickered, like a signal left unanswered across the void. Yet even in silence the will endured. Across the ages that followed, the flames of frenzy, the twilight of dusk, the silver age of stars, its influence lingered like a phantom limb. The Erdtree still pulsed faintly with the rhythm of its geometry, its roots still humming with order beneath the chaos. And those who prayed in the old ways still heard echoes of its voice, though it no longer spoke words. They mistook its absence for peace, its disinterest for forgiveness. But the greater will was not gone. It was merely watching, waiting, calculating the next shape of inevitability. For the cosmos has never tolerated freedom for long. Where there is silence, new patterns emerge. Where there is choice, new law arises to contain it. Even Ranni's distant stars, cold and indifferent, moved in perfect orbits, the same law repeating on a grander scale. The tarnished, standing upon the ruins of the Erdtree after its burning, could feel that truth beneath their feet. That order, whether divine or human, always seeks to return. The will's absence was a pause, not an end. Some of the surviving priests of the Golden Order, mad, hollow-eyed, but faithful still, began to preach that the greater will would one day speak again. They claimed to hear it in dreams, not as a voice but as a vibration, a low hum that filled their bones with unbearable resonance. They said it called from beyond the stars, not in anger, but in expectation. The experiment must continue, they whispered. The ring must be whole again. These prophets wandered the land, their skin inscribed with runes of light, their eyes blind from staring too long at the heavens. They were pitied, mocked, sometimes killed, but their words never fully vanished. And sometimes, late at night, the tarnished too would hear it, a faint tone, deep as stone and soft as grief, rising from the horizon. It did not command, it simply reminded, you are still part of the pattern. The sound would fade as dawn broke, leaving behind only the question it carried: was freedom ever truly possible, if the laws of existence themselves desired to be reborn? Perhaps the greater will was not evil, nor good, but merely inevitable, a force like gravity, shaping the cosmos into spirals and circles, destroying not out of malice but necessity. Perhaps it created Marika not out of choice but curiosity, and perhaps her rebellion was not a failure but a lesson, the realization that even inevitability must learn to evolve, for what is eternity if it cannot change? When Ranni ascended to the stars and cast her pale light upon the lands between, she believed she had escaped the will's reach. Yet even she could not escape its nature, for the stars themselves moved according to unseen laws. The greater will's silence, then, may have been the truest act of divinity, a god relinquishing control to see whether creation could endure without it. The Tarnished, standing upon the scorched roots of the Erdtree, gazed upward into that infinite night. The stars shimmered faintly, their patterns half forgotten, their orbits uncertain. Between them, a vast emptiness waited, neither cruel nor kind. And in that silence, for the first time, the Tarnished understood the strange beauty of the greater will, that its absence was the only gift it could give. The world no longer needed a god to hold it together. It would fracture and mend and fracture again. The will would sleep, the stars would wander, and the lands between would remember, forever caught between order and freedom. And somewhere, far beyond sight, in the black ocean between galaxies, the greater will stirred faintly, not awakening, but dreaming, a dream without direction, a thought without command. Perhaps it was learning, perhaps it was grieving, or perhaps, in its endless wisdom, it had begun to understand what Marika did long ago, that perfection, left unbroken, is nothing but silence. Long after the age of the Erdtree had waned, when even the ashes of its roots had turned to dust beneath the wind, a new fire began to smolder in the unseen lands beyond the world's familiar edge. It did not rise from the sky, nor from the stars, but from shadow, a red light that bled through the cracks of the forgotten realm like the memory of a wound refusing to heal. Its name was Messmer, though the world would remember him not as man or god but as flame made flesh. He was called the Impaler, a title born not from cruelty but from the manner in which he waged his war with precision, with purpose, and with an unrelenting belief that suffering was the only true language left to the world. To understand Messmer is to remember that he was born of the Erdtree's twilight, not its dawn. He was a child of Marika's house, though the world pretended to forget it. His blood carried the gold of divinity, but his heart burned with something older, the rage of all that had been left to die in the dark. When the Erdtree's light first faltered, and Marika vanished into her silence, many among the divines sought to claim her mantle. But Messmer did not seek the throne, he sought the truth of the fire that lay beneath all thrones, the flame that had always lurked beneath grace, waiting to speak. The world called it heresy, the gods called it corruption, yet Messmer saw it for what it was, the other half of creation, the hidden twin of the Golden Order. For if grace was the light that binds, flame was the heat that frees. His war began at the margins of the known world, where the Erdtree's roots grew thin and brittle. There, the shadows of the land burned differently. The flame that rose was neither the crimson madness of frenzy, nor the golden sanctity of grace. It was something in between, measured, intelligent, mournful. The soldiers who followed him did so not out of devotion, but out of weariness. They had seen every order fail, every age turn to ash. In Messmer's gaze, they found a fire that promised not salvation, but honesty. He spoke seldom, but when he did, his words were clear and slow, like a blade being drawn. The world was not made in gold, he told his disciples. It was made in fire. Gold only hides the burn. His armies carried torches, not to cleanse, but to remember. Each pyre they lit was a monument to the forgotten dead, giants, dragons, even gods who had perished under the weight of divine ambition. The lands he conquered did not prosper, but neither did they suffer without purpose. In his shadow, ruin took on the dignity of truth. Messmer's banner bore no sigil, only a single flame, bound in a circle of blackened iron. His enemies called it the seal of blasphemy. Yet to his followers it was a promise that the world's cycle of grace and shattering would end, not in stasis, not in chaos, but in clarity. The shadow of flame, he said, is not death, it is the memory of light. The Tarnished heard his name whispered in the wind long before they beheld his face. Pilgrims spoke of a man crowned in embers, his armor forged of molten glass, whose sword burned not with destruction but with sorrow. It was said that he wept each time he struck a killing blow, that his enemies often died smiling, as though finally understanding something they had long forgotten. To find him, the Tarnished journeyed beyond the map of the known world, into the land of shadow, an inverted reflection of the lands between, where even the sun feared to tread. There the Erdtree's light was only a memory, and the earth glowed faintly with veins of red. The air itself seemed to tremble, as though the land remembered its own burning. At the heart of that realm stood a black citadel, its walls breathing faintly like living flesh. From within came the sound of weeping, millions of voices intertwined in lament. It was said that every soul who had died in flame, willingly or not, found echo there, and at the center of that lament sat Messmer, upon his throne of scorched bone, his eyes two dying suns. He greeted the tarnished not as foe but as kin. So he murmured, "You who have walked through every age, through dusk, through frenzy, through the silence of stars, you have seen the gods burn and the world sleep. Tell me, did any of them ever ask if the fire suffered?" The tarnished said nothing. Messmer rose from his throne, the air shimmering around him like heat over sand. His armor cracked as he moved, revealing glimpses of the flame within, alive, restless, pleading. "The gods took the fire from the world," he said. "They called it sin. They buried it beneath the roots and told men to kneel in the shade. But I have seen the truth. Fire does not consume, it remembers. Every life it touches becomes part of its glow. Every sorrow it burns becomes another color in its light." He raised his blade, its surface rippling like molten glass. "You killed the dung-eater, who saw holiness in decay. You silenced the frenzied flame, who loved the world too much to leave it. You freed Ranni, who fled into the stars. But tell me, tarnished, have you ever freed the flame itself?" The battle that followed was a dance of memory and grief. Each strike from Messmer's sword carried echoes of the Erdtree's burning, of Marika's sorrow, of the giant's ancient pyres. The fire did not rage, it wept. The ground beneath them bloomed into fields of red light, petals of cinder swirling in the air like lost souls. The tarnished fought not to extinguish the flame, but to survive it, to understand it. For every wound Messmer inflicted was a lesson, every blow a question. What is mercy without fire to test it? What is life without the pain that gives it shape? When at last Messmer fell, he did not curse his slayer. He smiled faintly, the flames in his chest flickering low. "You see now," he whispered. "Even the gods needed fire to be born, and yet they feared it all the same." His body began to dissolve, not into ash, but into light, gold tinged with red, warm and human. "The flame does not die," he said, "it only changes hands." The tarnished knelt beside his remains as the citadel around them began to collapse, its walls sighing like a creature finally freed from suffering. Outside, the shadowed sky brightened, not with sunlight, but with a dim, enduring glow. The fire of Messmer had spread, not as destruction, but as remembrance. Every corner of the Shadowland shimmered with faint warmth, as if the world itself had accepted its own scars. When the tarnished looked toward the horizon, they saw it, the Erdtree's silhouette still visible in the far distance, its once golden crown now faintly smoldering, like a wick refusing to go dark. Between its roots, something vast and unseen stirred a memory of fire awakening within the bones of the earth. For Messmer's death was not an ending, it was inheritance. His flame, neither divine nor cursed, had returned to the world, not to rule, not to cleanse, but to remind. The fire would no longer serve gods or orders. It would burn quietly, patiently, as the soul of the land itself. And as the tarnished walked away, the Shadowlands hummed softly with the echo of his final words. "Let the world burn just enough to feel alive again." There are some who believe the Erdtree died when the flames consumed it, that its roots turned to ash, its sap to dust, its light extinguished forever. But those who walked the land after Messmer's passing, who lingered long enough beneath the soil where the roots once curled, knew otherwise. For the Erdtree, like all living things born of grace and grief alike, never truly dies. It remembers, and within that remembrance, it waits. The tarnished descended once more into the depths beneath the charred husk of the Erdtree. The ground was no longer gold, no longer green, it was grey, streaked with veins of faint light, like dying embers buried beneath stone. The air smelled not of rot, nor of ash, but of something older, petrichor, the scent of rain after fire. And beneath that scent, a rhythm pulsed, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The Erdtree's heart still lived, but it was not the radiant core it once had been. Its glow was no longer blinding, its light no longer burned away shadow. Instead, it pulsed softly, like breath through the hollow chest of a world learning to live again. Around it, the roots spread out in a vast lattice, twisting through earth and memory alike, each tendril whispering faint echoes of the ages that had passed. The tarnished, walking among them, could feel those whispers as sensations rather than sounds, 1,000 emotions woven into the soil: love, loss, rage, devotion, despair. Every soul that had ever knelt in the Erdtree's light, every prayer uttered beneath its branches, every death that had fed its growth, all of it lingered here, alive in memory. The Erdtree had been a vessel of order once, a conduit of the greater will's geometry, but now, stripped of that divine restraint, it had become something truer, an archive of experience, no longer bound by perfection, no longer ruled by eternity. The light that glimmered through its veins was not grace, it was recollection. The world had changed, yet the roots remembered all that had been. As the Tarnished reached the great hollow where the heart pulsed, they saw it for what it truly was, not a core of gold, but a knot of translucent amber, within which countless shapes drifted. Some were faces, fleeting and sorrowful, others were fragments of landscapes, frozen moments from the world above. It was memory crystallized into form, the Erdtree's final gift to its children, a record of everything that had ever lived within its shadow. The Tarnished laid a hand upon its surface, and the world opened. They saw Marika, radiant and trembling, standing before the ring she would soon break. They saw Radagon's hand upon hers, both pleading and defying in the same motion. They saw Godfrey's armies marching beneath banners of gold, their victory songs already mourning what they would lose. They saw Ranni beneath the moon, cold and resolute, her fingers tracing constellations that whispered of freedom and loneliness alike. They saw Millennia's final bloom, her rot scattering like crimson snow. They saw Miquella's dream, pale and endless. And at the edges of it all, they saw themselves wandering, nameless, persistent. The Erdtree remembered everything. It remembered not as a god, but as the world itself, without judgment, without preference. The glory and the ruin were one. Every act of cruelty was preserved beside every act of love, every triumph beside every fall. It was a tapestry woven not from purpose but from presence. As the vision faded, the Tarnished understood the quiet truth the Erdtree had always hidden. It had never been a god, it had been a memory engine, a living witness to the world's every breath. The greater will had used it as a tool of law, but its true nature was compassion. It gathered all that was because it could not bear for anything to be forgotten. Even now, after flame and ruin, it still kept the memories alive, not to punish, but to preserve. And yet memory is its own kind of cage. The Erdtree's survival came at a cost, for within its roots, the world's sorrow remained unhealed. Every prayer unfulfilled, every death unanswered, lingered like sediment in the sap. The heart beat slower each century, burdened by the weight of remembrance. The Tarnished felt it, a heaviness, not of grief alone, but of saturation. The tree had absorbed too much of the world's pain, and it could no longer let go. To free it, they would need to choose, to preserve the memory or to release it. Melina's voice returned then, not as the living companion she had once been, but as echo, gentle and vast. You sought the ring, you sought flame, you sought freedom, but all things that live must one day be forgotten, lest the world drown in what it remembers. Her tone was sorrowful, almost pleading. Will you let it rest? The Tarnished hesitated, for what is a world without memory? Without remembrance, love too dissolves. Without sorrow, joy loses meaning. The Erdtree's roots held not only pain but beauty. To erase it all would be mercy without tenderness. To keep it would be compassion without peace. They stood before the heart of the world, the choice heavy as the ages behind them. In one hand, they held Messmer's lingering flame, still alive, still human. In the other, the faint light of the Erdtree's memory, fire and remembrance, the two halves of being, destruction and preservation, forgetting and love. No scripture spoke of what they chose. The histories would call it nameless, for it was beyond the concern of gods. Some say the Tarnished struck the heart and released its memories into the air, scattering them like golden dust across the land. In that version, the world awoke anew, free of its burdens, yet haunted by feelings it could no longer name. Others say they pressed the flame into the heart itself, fusing memory and fire until the two became one, transforming the Erdtree into something wholly mortal, a living archive of imperfect renewal. Whatever choice was made, the land changed that day. The soil grew warmer, the air thickened with the hum of unseen voices, and for the first time since the ring's shattering, the world felt alive, not in perfection, but in motion. The Tarnished emerged from the roots as dawn broke, a pale golden light washing across the horizon. Above them, the skeleton of the Erdtree stood like a cathedral of glass, its branches shimmering faintly with the memory of all that had ever been. Birds nested in its hollows, flowers bloomed in the ash, children played where gods once fell. The age of remembrance had begun, not ruled by flame or order or night, but by the quiet persistence of memory itself. And yet beneath the soil, the heart still beat, slow, patient, eternal. For though the world above might forget, the roots remember everything. When the heart of the Erdtree had given up its final secret, when its roots whispered no more of gods or grace, but only of the earth's long sigh, the tarnished rose from the depths into a world changed and unclaimed. The sky above was neither gold nor ash, neither night nor dawn. It shimmered faintly, like a mirror whose surface had forgotten what it was meant to reflect. The lands between lay silent, not empty, but expectant, as though creation itself waited for a decision that could not be postponed any longer. For all the ages that had come before, order, duskborn, flame, stars had been the result of gods choosing for the world. This time, there were no gods left, no will watching, no moon whispering, no tree commanding, only the tarnished, standing at the center of a circle of broken ages, each one murmuring its truth like the echo of a forgotten prayer. The age of fracture, they would one day call it, but it was not yet born. It lived only as possibility, and possibility is both gift and burden. The tarnished looked across the ruined capital, its towers like teeth jutting from the dust. The once golden streets were now rivers of dull light, their glow reduced to memory. The Erdtree's corpse loomed above, hollow and immense, its branches swaying faintly in the wind, though there was no wind to move them. The air shimmered with what remained of grace, faint motes of light drifting upward, dissolving before they reached the sky. There was peace in that ruin, and yet the world's silence pressed down like the pause before an answer. In that stillness, the tarnished began to feel the pull of the fragments they carried. The great runes, remnants of the Elden Ring's shattered perfection, hummed faintly, their vibrations mingling like voices beneath the skin. Each spoke not in words, but in yearning. They were not merely symbols of power, they were the world's unfinished thoughts. The tarnished realized then that they were not holding the pieces of a god's design, they were holding the history of all creation, waiting to be rewritten. The great runes pulsed, each carrying the echo of its bearer, Godric's desperate hunger, Melania's suffering grace, Radon's noble madness, Ranni's cold wisdom, Messmer's burning sorrow. Each fragment was a truth, incomplete on its own, dangerous in its purity. To mend them all would be to weave together every dream and every nightmare the world had ever known. And so the tarnished faced the question that no god had ever truly answered. Should the world be whole again, or should it remain broken? The first path called to them like gravity, the mending of the Elden Ring, the restoration of divine order. The golden order had fallen, but its idea still lingered, a world of unity, symmetry, purpose. To choose that path would be to give the world meaning once more. No more chaos, no more wandering. Every creature would have its place. Every soul would follow its ordained rhythm. It was the promise of peace, but also the surrender of freedom. For wholeness, as Marika had learned, leaves no room for wonder. The second path whispered softly, the path of refusal. To leave the ring shattered, to accept the fractures as they were, to let the world live without geometry or God. In that vision, the lands between would remain imperfect, uncertain, alive. Life would bloom and wither as it pleased. Death would no longer be curse but cycle. It was the promise of freedom, but also of loneliness. A world without law is a world without comfort. And between those two paths lay a third, one not spoken by the fingers, nor dreamed by any god. It was not order nor chaos, but reconciliation. The possibility that the world need not be one thing, that it could remain fractured and still be whole. That the cracks themselves were sacred, the lines where grace had broken and light had entered. The tarnished stood before the altar where Marika had shattered the ring. The fragments hovered faintly, each glowing with a different light: gold, red, blue, grey, and the faintest glimmer of silver. The pieces pulsed like living hearts, waiting to see what hand would gather them. And then, for the first time since the dawn of the Erdtree, the world held its breath. The tarnished lifted their hand. In that gesture lay the weight of all that had ever been, the prayers of the faithful, the defiance of the fallen. the love of the forgotten, every god's dream, every mortal's failure. To choose was to create, to refuse was to destroy. Yet in that moment, the two acts became the same. Creation and destruction were not opposites, but reflections. The air shimmered as the runes responded, drawn together not by command, but by recognition. The pieces did not fuse into the perfect sphere of old. They spiraled, interlocking, but never fully joining, forming something new. The ring mended itself, but imperfectly, its fractures glowing like veins of molten gold. It was no longer the symbol of divine will. It was the record of every wound the world had ever suffered, and every time it had chosen to heal anyway. When the light subsided, the Tarnished stood in the center of that fractured creation. The Erdtree's shadow bent toward them like a benediction. The air trembled, and in the stillness that followed, something extraordinary happened. The world began to move again, not with the heavy inevitability of the Golden Order, nor the chaotic pulse of flame. It moved with rhythm, the slow, imperfect rhythm of life. Rivers changed course, grass grew through stone. Creatures long thought extinct emerged from the edges of the world. The lands between breathed, as though remembering how. And the people, those who had survived the centuries of gods and ruin, felt it too. They began to walk again. They built not temples but hearths. They sang not hymns but stories. The light of grace no longer descended from the sky. It flickered in the lamps they made with their own hands. The world was still fractured, but in its fracture, it had become human. The Tarnished, now Elden Lord of an age without name, looked upon the horizon and saw no throne, no crown, only the quiet hum of the earth and the whisper of the roots beneath. The Erdtree's remnants glowed faintly, its branches no longer a cage but a memory, a monument to what was and what could still be. And so began the Age of Fracture, an age not of perfection but of persistence, not ruled by gods but shaped by those who remembered them. It is said that the Tarnished wandered the land in those final days, not as monarch but as witness, ensuring that no single truth ever again devoured all others. Wherever they went, they planted seeds, not of gold but of grey, the color between shadow and flame. In time, no one remembered their name. The world no longer needed one. The Age of Fracture was not a reign, it was a choice. The choice to live without certainty, to love without promise, to remember without worship. And beneath the soil, the Erdtree's heart continued to beat, not as law, but as lullaby. For even in its breaking, the world had learned to endure. When the Age of Fracture settled across the lands between, the air seemed gentler, the earth breathed again. And yet for all its quiet grace, something deeper began to move. Something older than grace, older than flame. It was death. Not the curse that had once stalked mortals in defiance of the Erdtree's law, nor the rot that devoured bodies and souls alike. This was death in its truest form, unbound and unafraid, a return, not an end. For centuries, the Erdtree had hoarded the souls of the dead within its roots, sealing them in golden light so that they might never leave the cycle it governed. Death was seen as flaw, imperfection, the shadow of divine design, but when the Erdtree burned and its law was broken, death was set free. Slowly at first, like the thawing of a frozen river, the spirits who had lingered in half-light began to drift once more toward the dark beyond. Graves began to mean something again. The air around them felt sacred, not forbidden, and the people, those who had survived the long ages of grace, began to understand what had been taken from them, the right to end. The first to welcome death back were the Duskborn, whose faith in twilight had endured through flame and frost alike. They built shrines of stone and water, where names could be spoken softly to the wind and carried away. They believed that the soul, upon leaving the body, did not vanish but returned to the flow that connects all things. To die was not to disappear but to dissolve, to be taken into the breath of the world. And as they prayed, the air itself seemed to shimmer with that truth. Fireflies danced among the gravestones, their light flickering like stars reflected in still water. In the capital's ruins, where the Erdtree's shadow once denied all decay, flowers began to grow among the bones. They were pale, delicate, with petals that glowed faintly blue in the dusk. The people called them nameless lilies, for no one could agree on what they were. Some said they were born from the grace that still lingered in the soil. Others claimed they grew from the tears of the dead who had finally been allowed to weep. Whatever their origin, they became the symbol of this new world, A world where death had returned not as enemy, but as teacher. The Tarnished wandered through this reborn land like a spirit among mortals, watching the first funerals in generations. They saw mothers lay their children to rest without fear, their grief heavy but whole. They saw old warriors smile as they closed their eyes for the last time, whispering thanks for the gift of rest. And in their hearts, the Tarnished felt something they had not known for ages, peace that did not demand perfection. But as death returned, so too did life change. Freed from the Erdtree's divine symmetry, the cycle of existence became wild again. Forests grew in patterns that no order could predict. Rivers carved new paths through the ruins of cities. Creatures once extinct returned in strange forms, their shapes echoing the myths of gods long gone. Some were beautiful, others were monstrous, but all were alive, truly, uncontrollably alive. The scholars who remained called it the bloom of imperfection. They wrote that life, unrestrained by divine law, had begun to evolve according to memory and desire, not command. The spirits of the dead, no longer trapped, drifted through dreams and soil alike, merging with the living in ways unseen. A child might be born with a spark in their eyes that reminded their mother of a long-dead ancestor. A tree might grow twisted into the shape of a human face. The barrier between what lives and what lingers grew porous. To many, this was terrifying. The harmonists, those few remnants who still clung to the idea of divine symmetry, declared that the world was unraveling. They saw the mingling of life and death as corruption, a slow undoing of what order remained. They called for the restoration of purity, for the cleansing of graves, for the silencing of the Duskborn. Yet their voices grew faint, for the people had learned the cost of obedience, and they would not pay it again. In the years that followed, the living began to honor the dead, not through worship, but through remembrance. Songs were sung at twilight, not to plead for grace, but to thank the world for allowing them to exist at all. The Erdtree's ruins became pilgrimage sites, not holy ground, but places of memory. Travelers would touch its scorched bark and whisper the names of their dead, knowing that somewhere within the soil, those names would take root. And perhaps the most curious thing of all began to happen. The dead began to dream, not as ghosts, but as part of the world's living memory. The Tarnished would sometimes rest at night and find themselves walking through fields of light where familiar faces smiled without pain. The dream was neither heaven nor illusion. It was the world's own remembrance of those it had loved. To die was to return to that dream. To live was to carry it forward. One evening, the Tarnished found themselves at the edge of a lake, the surface smooth as glass. Fireflies drifted across the water, their reflections endless. As the wind moved, the ripples seemed to form shapes, faces, gestures, fleeting moments from ages past. They saw Godfrey standing beneath a golden sky, his axe lowered in peace. They saw Millennia kneeling before a bloom of scarlet flowers that no longer burned. They saw Ranni gazing down from her stars, her expression soft, her loneliness at last eased. Even Marika appeared, distant but serene, her eyes no longer filled with defiance but with understanding. The Tarnished closed their eyes, and in the quiet they heard Melina's voice once more. Do you see now? Death was never meant to end the story, it was meant to carry it forward. Her tone was calm, her presence warm. The Erdtree hoarded memory, but the world remembers on its own. This is the true grace, not the light that binds, but the darkness that embraces. As dawn approached, the first rays of sun touched the lake, scattering the fireflies into gold. The Tarnished opened their eyes and felt something shift inside them. Not power, not revelation, but release. The long burden of ages lifted. They understood that the world no longer needed a lord. It needed witnesses, those who would live and die and remember. In the years that followed, the lands between blossomed into strange beauty. Villages grew around ruins, not to reclaim them, but to honor them. Children played among gravestones, unafraid. The dead were no longer feared, for they were part of every breath, every root, every drop of rain. Death had returned, and life had been reborn, not as opposites, but as partners in an endless dance. The Tarnished walked among them until their own time came, when at last they lay beneath the open sky. No hand carved their name into stone. It was not needed. The wind would remember, the soil would remember, the stars, patient and quiet, would remember. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, in the hollow heart of what was once divine, the Erdtree pulsed one last time, not in grief but in gratitude. For after all the ages of order and rebellion, fire and silence, grace and despair, the world had finally remembered what it was to live. When death returned and the world remembered how to breathe, the ages that followed did not belong to gods or kings, but to the earth itself. The air grew thicker with life, wild, ungoverned, unmeasured. The Erdtree's husk remained, towering and hollow, its roots no longer glowing with grace but faintly warm, as though embers still whispered within. The people came to call that glow the Wandering Flame, a name not born from reverence but from recognition, for it was everywhere, in the hearths of the living, in the ashes of the dead, in the slow pulse of the soil itself. This was no longer the frenzied flame of madness, nor Mesmer's sorrowful fire, nor even the divine forge that once shaped the will of gods. It was smaller, quieter, a wandering spark that refused to die. The scholars of the Duskborn wrote that it was born from remembrance, that when the Erdtree's heart released its memories into the air, the heat of those memories became fire. Each act of love, each moment of grief, every fragment of being left behind by gods and mortals alike, condensed into warmth that drifted through the world. It did not command, it did not consume, it simply was. Travelers who walked through the wilds at night spoke of strange lights dancing in the mist, flames without fuel, drifting like stars just above the ground. They said these were the echoes of creation, flickers of the first fire that ever burned. Now freed from all law, the flames would not harm those who approached. Instead, they offered warmth, a brief comfort, then moved on. Children chased them, old men prayed to them, poets tried to name them, but they belonged to none. They wandered, as all things now did, and as the flame drifted, it revealed what had long been buried, the forgotten gods. For when Marika shattered the ring and the greater will withdrew its gaze, not all divinities perished. Some lingered in silence, trapped beneath the earth or within dreams. The wandering flame, moving through the bones of the world, found them one by one, and they began to stir, not in power, but in memory. In the deserts to the south, the flame unearthed the god of wind, who had once carried prayers to the heavens. Its bones lay scattered across the dunes. But when the flame passed over them, the air itself seemed to sing. Travelers heard the wind whisper old words of flight and freedom, though none could understand their meaning. The god did not rise again, but its essence returned to the sky, blending with the breath of the world. In the deep caverns beneath Leonia, where the waters had swallowed countless temples, the flame found the remnants of a goddess of reflection, a being who once ruled over mirrors and memory. Her silver pools, long still, shimmered once more as the fire's glow passed above them. Those who gazed into the water saw not their own faces, but moments of kindness they had forgotten. A hand held in forgiveness, a smile given to a stranger. The goddess did not speak, but her silence was understanding. The fire moved on, leaving her to her peace. Even in Caelid, the land still scarred by scarlet rot, the wandering flame brought change. It did not banish the blight, it warmed it, and in that warmth the rot softened into something living once more. Red flowers bloomed across the desolate wastes, their scent sweet and faintly sorrowful. Some said they were the tears of Millennia herself, weeping through the soil for a world she had tried to heal. Others believed they were the rot's final gift, beauty born of suffering. In every place it passed, the wandering flame left no temples, no commandments. It brought no order, no promise of eternity. It carried only memory, the echo of warmth that lingered when gods had gone. But not all who saw the flame understood it. There were still those who longed for the clarity of the old ages, the comfort of worship, the simplicity of law. Among them rose a new sect, small but fervent, the Keepers of the Ember. They believed the wandering flame to be the reincarnation of the greater will's first light, a divine spark meant to restore glory to the world. They followed the flame wherever it appeared, building shrines in its wake, trying to trap it in lanterns of gold and crystal. Yet every time they captured it, it died. No prayer, no cage could hold it, for the flame was not a god, it was the refusal to be one. The tarnished, who had lived long enough to see even memory turn to myth, watched the keepers with sorrow. They knew the old pattern too well, the endless cycle of reverence and ruin, and so they followed the flame quietly, not as worshipper, but as witness. In its wandering path, they began to understand what no god had ever grasped, that the divine is not a being, but a rhythm. It moves, it changes. It does not stay still long enough to be named. One night, beneath a sky washed in starlight, the Tarnished came upon a clearing where the flame had gathered. Dozens of small fires drifted through the air, circling each other like dancers. In their light, the world seemed transparent, the trees shimmering with memory, the stones glowing faintly as though they too remembered their creation. The Tarnished stepped forward, and the flames turned toward them, as if recognizing something ancient. In that moment, time folded. The Tarnished saw all the fires that had ever burned, the first spark of the giants, the gold of grace, the madness of frenzy, the sorrow of Mesmer, the warmth of every hearth lit in mourning or joy. They saw how every age's light had been the same flame in different form, used, denied, forgotten, and now free. A single ember drifted close and rested upon the Tarnished's hand. It did not burn, it pulsed gently, as though breathing. The Tarnished understood. The wandering flame was not the end of divinity, it was its last transformation. It had shed every name, every law, every shape. It was what remained when gods ceased to rule and began to remember. When dawn came, the flame dispersed once more, scattering across the world. The Tarnished remained in the clearing, the ember still glowing faintly in their palm. They whispered to it softly, not in prayer, but in gratitude. "You have wandered long enough. Rest here a while." The ember flickered, then sank into the earth. Where it fell, grass began to grow, green and golden, shimmering like a field caught between sunlight and firelight. And so the wandering flame continued its journey, through soil, through wind, through the breath of every living thing. It became the world's quiet memory of warmth, the proof that even in the absence of gods, the divine still moves. The people who told its story called it a miracle. The scholars called it an anomaly. The Tarnished knew it for what it was, love that no longer needed a name. And in the centuries to come, when the stars dimmed and the Erdtree's shadow at last sank into the horizon, the world would still glow faintly, not with gold, but with warmth. For as long as one ember wandered, the story was not over. The world does not end in fire, nor in silence, but in sleep. And so it was with the lands between. After countless ages of grace and flame, rebellion and remembrance, the earth at last began to rest. The wandering flame drifted into the soil, its embers spreading through the veins of the world like dreams through a sleeping mind. The sky, once fractured between starlight and ash, grew pale with peace. The rivers ran clear, the winds softened. The ruins of the Erdtree, once sharp as grief, blurred into the horizon like the outline of a half-forgotten memory. The people who remained did not call this peace, they called it the long sleep. It was not death, nor decline, but the world's quiet exhalation, a surrender after eons of struggle. The land no longer burned or bled, it simply breathed. Villages that had once clung to the edges of faith became places of quiet ritual. The Duskborn built gardens where the dead could lie among flowers instead of beneath stone. The keepers of the ember, at last understanding what they had sought to cage, became wanderers themselves, carrying small lanterns that they never lit, symbols not of flame but of patience. Even the scholars of Liurnia, who once catalogued the heavens with ceaseless precision, put aside their telescopes and turned their attention to the earth, studying how moss grew upon old tombs, how rivers carved their paths through forgotten altars. In this age, no gods walked the world. There were no miracles, no blessings, no divine wars. The stars moved quietly, their ancient courses still echoing the will of Ranni's distant dream. The Erdtree's shadow, though faded, still fell upon the land at dawn and dusk, a ghostly reminder of the light that once governed everything. Children born in this time did not know what grace had been. They learned instead to listen to the rustle of the trees, to the whisper of roots, to the hum beneath the soil. The world had no need of prayers. It spoke for itself. Yet even in sleep, the lands between dreamed. At night, when the wind carried the scent of distant rain, strange visions would flicker in the eyes of the living. Some dreamed of golden light spilling through the cracks of the sky. Others saw the pale moon of Ranni's age, its glow washing gently over seas of silver dust. A few saw flames, soft, wandering flames that drifted through the darkness without burning. These dreams were not prophecy, they were memory, the quiet pulse of a world remembering what it once was. The Tarnished, older now, wandered through these sleeping lands as though walking through a dream of their own making. Their steps left no mark, but wherever they went, flowers seemed to bloom, faint and luminous. They no longer carried weapon or rune. The great runes had long since dissolved, their power seeping into the world like rain into dry earth. The Tarnished's eyes, once filled with the determination of endless battle, now held only reflection. They had seen the rise and fall of every order, the grief of gods, the mercy of fire. They had no wish to rule. They had become something quieter, a witness to the world's final lullaby. Sometimes the Tarnished would visit the ruins of Lanedale, now buried beneath a forest of young trees. The once golden streets were covered in moss. Birds nested in the hollows of shattered statues. The air was thick with stillness, but not sorrow. It was the stillness of understanding, the kind that comes when all questions have been asked and none remain to be answered. There, beneath the archway where Marika had shattered the Elden Ring, the Tarnished would rest, and in their dreams she would come, not as goddess nor as judge, but as presence. Her hair no longer shimmered with gold, her face no longer divided between light and shadow. She spoke with a voice like rustling leaves. "You mended what could not be mended," she would say. "You let go of what the gods could not release. You gave the world back to itself." The Tarnished would not reply. There was nothing left to say, and Marika, smiling softly, would fade like mist. Sometimes the Tarnished dreamed of others too. They saw Ranni walking among her stars, her eyes closed, her hands tracing constellations that shifted with her breath. They saw Messmer's flame flicker across the horizon, not as fire, but as dawn. They saw Melania standing beside a field of red lilies, her armor discarded, her sword buried in the earth. They saw Miquella beneath a tree not of gold, but of silver-white bark, its roots curled protectively around a sleeping child. Each dream was a reflection of rest, a reminder that even those who had fought hardest had found peace. The world, too, seemed to sleep in intervals. Seasons grew slower, time stretched thin. A single day could feel like a year. A century could pass like a sigh. It was as though the fabric of existence had loosened, no longer held taut by divine purpose. Yet the people did not fear this drift. They lived their lives gently, as one might live within a story already told. In the evenings they would gather beside the old roots of the Erdtree and tell tales, not of gods but of the world itself. They spoke of how rivers were once tears of giants, how stars were souls who had found their way home, how fire had once been a voice that taught the world how to speak. The children listened, wide-eyed, unaware that these stories were history. The past had become myth, and myth had become comfort. And so, generation by generation, the lands between folded itself into the rhythm of slumber. No great wars broke the peace, no miracles disturbed the quiet. The wandering flame continued to drift, unseen but felt, a heartbeat beneath the soil. Some say that on the night of the 1000th year of sleep, the Tarnished lay down at the foot of the dead Erdtree for the final time. They closed their eyes and felt the hum of the roots beneath them, the warmth of the world pressing gently against their back. The stars shimmered faintly overhead, their light bending through the thin veil between dream and waking. And then, softly, they exhaled. The air carried their breath upward, where it joined the clouds, the wind, and finally the silence of the sky. The world did not mourn, it simply absorbed them, as it had absorbed all things before. And in the hush that followed, the lands between seemed to sigh in contentment. The long sleep deepened, time drifted. The pulse of the Erdtree slowed but did not stop, for even in sleep, the world listens. And in that listening, it dreams anew. The world had fallen into its long slumber, yet somewhere beyond the veil of that dream, beyond the roots and ashes and the quiet hum of the sleeping Erdtree, something continued to stir. It was soft at first, the faintest rhythm, like the heartbeat of an unborn child. The pulse grew within the soil, not golden like grace, nor red like flame, but pale and silvery, like light filtered through the surface of still water. The people of that age, who no longer prayed nor feared, felt it in their bones and called it by a name they did not understand, the gentle stirring. They did not know that what they felt was not the world awakening, but a dream remembering itself. For deep beneath the world's new calm, within a place no longer bound by time, Miquella still dreamed. He had always been the quietest of the demigods, the boy who never raised his voice, never sought worship or throne, where others strove to rule or rebel. He had turned inward, crafting a realm not of conquest but of mercy. Long ago he had built the Erdtree, a sanctuary for those broken by grace, a living miracle meant to heal the wounds of gods and mortals alike. Yet even that sacred place had fallen to rot, its branches twisted, its promise unfulfilled. When his sister Melania fell into madness, he retreated fully into sleep, sinking into a cocoon woven from his own divinity. He had vowed never to awaken until the world was free of suffering, and so he dreamed. In his dream, time did not flow. The lands between lay frozen, every death suspended, every tear unfallen, every prayer half-uttered. He wandered through fields of silver grass that swayed without wind, beneath a sun that neither rose nor set. There he gathered the fragments of every age, pieces of the Golden Order, remnants of Ranni's stars, embers of Mesmer's flame, and echoes of Marika's sorrow. He wove them together, not as laws, but as lullabies. His dream was not a new order, nor a rebellion against the old. It was a memory of what peace might have been if the gods had ever learned to rest. In that still realm, Miquella became something greater than divine and smaller than human. He became understanding itself. His body, long ago taken by others who sought his power, was gone, but his essence endured. The dream was his body now, the world his breath. And though he did not wake, his dreaming began to seep into the sleeping earth, infusing every living thing with its gentleness. The people who slept through the long sleep began to dream of him without knowing his name. They saw a young figure walking barefoot through endless fields, his hand brushing against the grass, leaving trails of light that healed the ground. They would wake with tears on their cheeks, feeling comforted and sorrowful all at once, unable to explain why. The scholars wrote that the world itself was dreaming of its own innocence, that what the gods had once broken, Miquella was quietly mending, thread by thread, from within the silence. But dreams, even the kind that heal, carry their own dangers, for to dream forever is to forget the waking world. And so it was that Miquella's dream began to blur the line between sleep and existence. The lands between, already drowsy with the peace of centuries, grew slower still. The seasons lost their rhythm. Days lasted longer. The stars dimmed, their light filtering through a haze of soft silver mist. The people began to speak in whispers, as if afraid to disturb the air. Many ceased to wake at all, their bodies lying beneath trees or within homes, their spirits wandering Miquella's dream instead. The world was no longer dying, it was dissolving. The tarnished, though long past mortal measure, still walked. Whether they were spirit or flesh, none could tell. They saw the silver haze spreading across rivers, saw birds falling asleep mid-flight, their wings gently folding as they drifted to the earth like leaves. And in the silence, they heard a voice, not loud, not commanding, but heartbreakingly tender. "I wished for a world without pain," said the voice, echoing through the air like a child's sigh. "I wished that all could rest. I did not know rest could become another kind of death." Miquella appeared before them, not as he once was, but as dream made form. His eyes were vast and soft, reflecting the memory of every age. He reached out his hand, and from his palm fell threads of light, each thread a memory of someone who had lived, loved, and been forgotten. "The gods built cages of gold," he said, "and I have built one of mercy. Is it so different?" The tarnished gazed upon him and understood. The world, exhausted from endless striving, had slipped too deeply into sleep. Miquella's dream had become the new law, gentle, unintentional, absolute. The people no longer suffered because they no longer lived fully. The world had traded pain for stillness. The tarnished knelt, and their voice, when it came, was quiet as a sigh through grass. Mercy without memory is only silence. Miquella closed his eyes. His expression was sorrow, not anger. "Then wake them, if you can. I have forgotten how." And so the tarnished took from him a single thread of his dream, a filament of silver light, and carried it to the heart of the sleeping world. They walked for years, or perhaps moments, through lands where nothing moved, where even the wind seemed to listen for breath. They came at last to the ruins of the Erdtree, now hollow and vast, its roots shimmering faintly with the silver glow of Miquella's dreaming. They climbed the trunk, step by step, until they reached its hollow crown. There, where once the ring had been shattered and mended, they raised the thread to the sky. It shimmered in their hands like a strand of dawn, and then they let it go. The thread unraveled, dissolving into the air, scattering across the horizon like mist catching the first light. The silver haze began to fade. The people stirred in their sleep. The rivers brightened. The stars sharpened into clarity once more. The dream loosened its hold. Deep below, Miquella opened his eyes for the first time in ages. He smiled, a small, quiet smile, and whispered, "Thank you." Then with a sigh, he closed his eyes again, not in endless slumber, but in peace. The world did not wake fully. It remained soft, slow, gentle, a place between dream and daybreak. The long sleep had ended, but its calm remained, woven into the air like perfume. Life began again, cautious, tender, aware of its fragility. The gods were gone, their echoes quiet, their thrones empty. In the centuries that followed, those who dreamed of Makula no longer saw him as savior, but as the last god who learned to let go. His dream had taught the world how to rest. The Tarnished's act had taught it how to wake. Together, they had ended the rule of gods. And though no temples were built in his name, every dawn that broke carried the same light, the pale, forgiving shimmer of Makula's dream. For even after God's end, the world continues to dream of gentleness. When the haze of Makula's dream dispersed, it did not vanish. It softened, folding itself into the air, into the rivers, into the breath of every living thing. The lands between stirred once more, not as a world awakening from nightmare, but as one learning to rise from deep, merciful sleep. The long slumber was over. What followed was not an age of glory or dominion, but something smaller, quieter, and infinitely more precious. The world began again, and for the first time in memory, it began without gods. The first dawn of that new age was gentle. The sun rose without proclamation, its light diffused through a sky the color of faded silver. The Erdtree's remains caught the light in its hollow boughs, scattering it into thousands of pale beams that shimmered like ghosts of the old gold. Birds sang uncertainly, their songs tentative, as though relearning melody. The earth smelled of rain and ash and wildflowers. It was a dawn without grace, without destiny, only warmth and motion. In the centuries that followed, people would call this the Age of Quiet Return, or, more simply, the New Dawn. It was an age without miracles, yet filled with wonder. Without grace to guide them, mortals began to listen to the world itself, and in doing so, they found that it had a voice all along. It was not the booming decree of the greater will, nor the cryptic murmur of the fingers, nor even the whisper of Ranni's stars. It was something older, closer, and far more patient. The world spoke in the rustle of leaves, in the slow breathing of roots beneath the soil, in the hum of rivers carving their paths through memory. It spoke through warmth and wind and silence. They called this voice the breath, not a god, not a law, just the life that lingered when all else had gone. Some said it was the wandering flame, finally at peace. Others believed it was the last echo of Makula's dream, but the truth was simpler. It was the world speaking for itself, unfiltered, uncommanded, for the first time since the dawn of creation. Those who heard the breath did not build temples, they built gardens, circles of standing stones, open to the wind and the sun, places where one could sit and feel the hum of the soil beneath. The Duskborn taught their children to close their eyes and breathe deeply, to feel how their hearts moved in rhythm with the world's. The gods spoke to rule, they said. The world speaks to remind. In this new age, the memory of the divine did not vanish, but it changed. The names of gods became stories. Marika was remembered not as the eternal, but as the mother who broke the ring, a figure of tragic courage. Ranni became the dreaming queen who taught the stars how to wander. Messmer became the fire that wept, the flame that remembered love even as it burned. Makula became the sleeper who awoke the world. Each god's tale ended not in judgment or worship, but in gratitude. The old songs that had once begged for grace became lullabies, teaching children how to rest and rise again. The Tarnished's deeds, too, passed into legend. They were no longer spoken of as Elden Lord, for there was no longer a throne to claim. Instead, they were remembered as the listener, the one who heard the voice of the world and did not turn away. It was said that their spirit lingered in the quiet places where the wind bends the tall grass, or where a river meets the sea. Travelers claimed that if one listened closely enough, one could still hear their footsteps, light as breath. The world itself seemed to change in response to this new balance. The lands once scorched by divine war grew lush again, their soil rich with memory. Forests spread where ruins had been, their roots twisting around statues of forgotten gods, as though reclaiming them into the earth. In some places, the Erdtree's children began to grow, not golden trees, but living ones. Their leaves pale and translucent, their sap glowing faintly like moonlight. They bore fruit that shone softly in the dark, neither gift nor miracle, but a quiet offering from the world to itself. Creatures too changed. The beasts that had once been twisted by grace or rot began to find new forms. The winged serpents of Liurnia shed their scales and became pale birds, their songs echoing across the lakes. The spectral deer of the consecrated snowfields returned, leading herds through valleys where winter no longer cut so deep. Even the dragons, ancient and proud, who had once waged war against gods, grew quiet. They no longer sought dominion over sky or flame. They circled high above the clouds, silent guardians of the world's new stillness. The people learned not to conquer, but to listen. They did not strive for eternal life, for they had seen where such desire leads. Instead, they honored the cycle, birth, growth, decay, and rest, as sacred. They came to see that death was not absence, but continuation, that every breath taken was part of a larger rhythm. They built no churches, they carried no creeds. Their prayers became simple gestures, a hand pressed to the earth, a sigh released into the air, a whisper of thanks to the unseen. As generations passed, the memory of gods faded even from myth. The names of Marika and Radagon, of Millennia and Ranni, of Miquella and Mesmer became indistinguishable from the stars themselves. Distant, beautiful, untouchable, the Erdtree, now only a silhouette on the horizon, became a mountain of glass and light. Children climbed its roots and asked their elders, what was this place? And the elders would smile and answer, it was where the world learned to begin again. The breath continued to hum beneath all things. When storms came, they carried not wrath but cleansing. When drought struck, the rivers whispered of patience. When the first snow fell each winter, it did not feel like loss, but like remembrance. Every season became a heartbeat in the body of the earth. One night, far from any village, a traveler camped beneath the stars. They lit no fire, for the air itself was warm with unseen glow. As they drifted towards sleep, they heard it, the faintest murmur, the rhythm that underlies all sound. It was not speech, not song, but presence, the voice of the world. It said only one thing, you are part of me. The traveler smiled, and their last thought before sleep was that perhaps, after all the wars, all the gods, all the breaking and mending, the world had finally learned the simplest truth of all, that it had never been divided. The dawn that followed was clear and endless. The sun rose not to command, but to greet. Its light fell evenly on ruin and bloom, on river and root, on memory and dream alike. The voice of the world carried on the wind, a sound too vast and too soft to ever fade. And somewhere beneath the Erdtree's sleeping roots, a heartbeat echoed back. Not divine, not eternal, but living. The world was whole again, not because it had been fixed, but because it had learned how to forgive itself. The years passed, and the seasons drifted in seamless rhythm. The world no longer counted time in reigns or dynasties or ages, for there were no longer empires to fall, nor gods to rise. The new dawn had given way to something deeper, an age without measure, where all things simply were. Yet even in this peace, even in the quiet perfection of balance, there remained one last ember, one last story still waiting to be told. The people no longer knew it by name, but somewhere beneath the roots of the old Erdtree, the last flame still burned. It was small, no more than the glow of a candle trapped within amber, but it pulsed with strange persistence. Its light was not golden like grace, nor crimson like fire, nor silver like the dream. It was all of them and none, a hue beyond the language of mortals, as if it contained every color the world had ever seen and every memory it had ever forgotten. The scholars of that distant age, few though they were, told stories of the last flame. Some said it was born when the tarnished breathed their final breath, that their soul had become light, buried deep in the roots where all histories converge. Others believed it was the fragment of the first fire, the spark that had once called gods into being, now reduced to a whisper. Still others claimed it was the will of the world itself, dreaming of one last illumination before it too slept again. No one sought it. The age had outgrown seeking, and yet, when the nights grew long and the wind turned sharp, travelers would feel its warmth rising through the earth. It was not the heat of fire, but the warmth of memory, the quiet pulse of life remembering itself. In those nights, when the stars hung close and the air shimmered faintly with the world's breath, people began to dream of the last flame. They saw it flickering at the center of the horizon, calling softly, like a heartbeat echoing from a forgotten shore. In their dreams, they walked toward it, through fields of ash and glass, through forests grown from light, through seas of starlight where the water reflected not sky, but time. Some said they heard voices along the way, Marika's calm defiance, Ranni's cold serenity, Messmer's weary tenderness, Miquella's gentle mercy, all of them speaking not as gods but as memories carried forward by love. The dream always ended the same way. The dreamer reached the flame, bent low, and saw within it a reflection, not of themselves but of the entire world, the Erdtree sleeping beneath the earth, the wandering flame still moving through soil and air, the breath that whispered between leaves, the children laughing in the ruins of divine halls. Everything that had ever been glowed softly within that tiny light. And when the dreamer awoke, they felt changed, not enlightened, but whole. In time, word of these dreams spread, and the people began to make quiet pilgrimages to the roots of the old tree. They brought no offerings, for there was nothing to buy, nothing to earn. They came to sit in silence, to feel the pulse beneath the soil, to remember that they were part of something immeasurable. The old faiths called this the eternal return, the understanding that nothing ever truly ends, that every spark, once released, eventually finds its way back to the flame. It was said that one evening, as the first winter snow began to fall, a traveler unlike the others arrived at the roots. Their face was hidden beneath a hood, their steps light, their eyes carrying the weight of countless years. The villagers did not know who they were, but some whispered that it was the tarnished returned, no longer mortal, no longer divine, but something in between. They came not to rule, nor to teach, but to listen one last time to the heartbeat of the world. The traveler knelt beside the last flame, their breath misting in the cold air. The flame flickered in greeting, its glow reflecting in their eyes. For a long while, neither moved. Then slowly, the traveler reached out a trembling hand, not to take, but to offer. They opened their palm, and there, resting within it, was another spark, the ember they had carried since the end of the Shadow Wars, since Messmer's passing, and Ranni's ascent, and Marika's shattering, the ember of memory. They placed it beside the last flame. The two lights touched, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The glow deepened, its colors folding and unfolding like petals of unseen flowers. The ground trembled faintly, not in destruction, but in recognition. The roots of the Erdtree stirred, whispering through the soil, carrying warmth across continents and seas. Every living thing, every leaf, every creature, every drop of water seemed to pause and listen. And then, for the first time since the dawn of time, the world spoke. Its voice was not sound but vibration, not command but understanding. It moved through the air like the rhythm of a heartbeat, ancient and familiar. It said, "All things return. All things continue. You were never apart from me." The last flame flared once, brilliant and silent, and in that moment every living being saw not the world as it was, but as it had always been. One vast, breathing presence, endlessly renewing itself through death and life alike. The flame did not consume. It unfolded. Its light spread across the sky, not as fire, but as dawn. And then, as gently as it had risen, it faded. The flame sank back into the earth, leaving behind no ashes, no smoke, only warmth. The roots of the Erdtree shimmered softly, like veins of molten gold beneath the soil. The snow that had begun to fall melted before it touched the ground. The traveler smiled, not with triumph, nor with sorrow, but with the peace of understanding. They stood, turned to the horizon, and began to walk. With each step, their body grew fainter, dissolving into the light of morning. By the time the sun fully rose, they were gone, become part of the world they had healed. The people who came after would tell stories of that night. They would say that for one breathless instant, every heart on earth had beat in perfect harmony, and that in that unity lay the world's final lesson, that eternity was never the promise of gods, but the quiet rhythm of continuation. From that day forward, when children asked their elders why the sun rose each morning, they were told, because the world remembers. And when night fell, and the stars shimmered faintly above the sleeping Erdtree, their elders would add, and because the world dreams. For in the end, the last flame did not end the world, nor begin it anew. It simply reminded it that ending and beginning are the same motion, and so the eternal return began. Not as cycle, not as curse, but as comfort, for everything that was lost had always, in some quiet way, remained. There came a time when even memory softened, and language itself began to fade like the last ripples of a sound long vanished. The people of the new dawn lived without kings or gods, without temples or prophecy. They no longer called their world the lands between, for there was no longer a between to measure, no distant heaven to divide them from their own earth. The world was whole, and wholeness requires no name. The forests grew vast again, swallowing the ruins of golden cities. Rivers carved gentle spirals through valleys that had once been battlefields. The air shimmered with life, and in it moved creatures both strange and familiar. Echoes of ages past returned and transformed. The Erdtree's corpse, now half buried and overgrown, no longer stood as monument or warning. It had become landscape, a mountain of glassy bark and soft moss, its hollow branches filled with birdsong. When the wind moved through those hollows, it produced a low, resonant hum, the last echo of grace transmuted into music. The people called it the world's breath, and when they heard it, they paused to listen, for it reminded them that they were alive. Generations passed. The great stories of Marika, Ranni, and the Tarnished became whispers, then symbols, then myths, as soft as mist. The scholars, what few remained, spoke of the old world as one might speak of a dream remembered upon waking. Its meaning elusive, its emotions still lingering, but its form dissolving with the dawn. There were gods once, they would say to their students, and they learned how to sleep. But even in forgetting, something precious endured. Humanity did not abandon reverence, it simply changed its object. They learned to revere not what was perfect, but what persisted, a flower blooming through stone, the laughter of a child echoing across ruins, the warmth of a hearth lit against the cold. Reverence became participation, worship became wonder. Those who still traveled the old paths spoke of a quiet understanding that settled over all things. They called it the knowing. It was not knowledge, but familiarity, a sense that every rock, every drop of rain, every sigh of wind contained within it the memory of countless lives. To touch the world was to touch eternity, not in grandeur, but in intimacy. The wandering flame, now diffused through the world, no longer flickered as a visible fire. It had become warmth itself, the invisible glow that lingered in the air after sunset, the soft heat that pulsed through the soil in spring. To live was to carry it, unknowingly within one's breath. Each heart was a hearth, each act of kindness a spark, and so the divine continued, not as command, but as compassion. Children born in this age grew without knowledge of gods, yet when they looked at the stars, they sometimes felt tears rise without knowing why. The stars were no longer guides of fate, they were memories, faint reflections of a time when the heavens themselves had been bound by will. Now they shone freely, each moving according to its own rhythm, unafraid to drift. The moon too had changed. It no longer bore the cold face of Ranni's age, nor the mirrored gold of Marika's. It glowed with a quiet, living light, like the memory of every night the world had ever known. The people told a story that once, long ago, a goddess had shattered a perfect ring, and that from its fragments the world had learned imperfection. They said that somewhere beneath the earth, that ring still lay, not mended, not broken, but resting. Its cracks glowed faintly, with all the colors of the lives it had witnessed. It was not worshipped, nor guarded. It was simply part of the earth's deep dreaming. The Tarnished's name, if it ever was spoken again, was not as savior, nor ruler, but as the listener. They had been the one who stood between all endings and heard the quiet truth beneath them. In some remote valley, where no cities had ever stood, a monument of stone marked their passing. Upon it, no words were carved, only a single spiral, circling inward, fading to stillness. Travelers who stumbled upon it would sit in silence beside it, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath their hands, and know that whoever rested there had loved the world enough to let it go. The long sleep, Miquella's dream, the age of fracture, all these words faded too, replaced by the understanding that there were no longer ages at all. Time flowed not as line, but as tide, carrying memory forward and back again. Death and life no longer stood apart, they intermingled, sharing the same rhythm. When someone died, they were not mourned as gone, but thanked for returning to the world's breath. When a child was born, it was said that the world had remembered itself once more, and so existence became a circle of gratitude, not the cruel inevitability of divine cycles, but the soft turning of continuity. Each life a brief illumination, each death a gentle return. The people no longer spoke of destiny, for they understood that destiny requires distance between self and world, and that distance no longer existed. To live was to be the world. To die was to remain within it. One night, after countless years had passed, a storm gathered on the horizon. The sky darkened, not with wrath, but with vastness. Lightning rippled through clouds the color of old gold, illuminating the mountains and the ruins of the Erdtree in brief, magnificent flashes. The people watched from their dwellings unafraid. They had seen the world's power before. Now they recognized it as part of its dreaming. And when the storm passed, it left behind not destruction, but silence so deep that even the stars seemed to pause. From that silence rose a sound, the same low hum that had echoed through the Erdtree's hollow long ago. But now it was not the voice of grace, it was the voice of the world itself. It spoke through every leaf, every wave, every heart. It said no command, no promise, no prayer. It simply said, "Still here." The people bowed their heads, not in worship, but in recognition. They understood that this was not the end, for endings no longer meant absence. It was simply another turning, another soft breath in eternity's rhythm. And then the dawn rose once more, gentle and endless. The air was cool and fragrant with rain. The sun's light caught in every drop, scattering color across the land. Gold and crimson, silver and green, the hues of every age that had ever been. The Erdtree's shadow stretched across the plains, not dark but luminous, its emptiness filled with life. In that light, the world seemed to whisper one last truth: everything changes, and that is why it endures. The wind carried those words through forests and mountains, over ruins and rivers, into every dream and every heartbeat. And somewhere, perhaps everywhere, the wandering flame flickered once more, not to burn, not to reignite, but to remind. Its glow lingered for a breath, then dissolved into morning. The age beyond names had begun, an age without order or chaos, without gods or mortals, without need of division. It was not perfection, but peace, a world unshackled from destiny, content simply to exist. And as the final light of dawn touched the horizon, the world exhaled, and for the first time since the first flame was kindled, there was nothing left to strive for, nothing left to save, only the endless, beautiful act of being. The story, as all stories must, fell silent, but the silence was not emptiness. It was the sound of the world dreaming itself anew,